Dixon came in late.
For anyone who may have arrived late, if you would like to speak later, you'll have to come forward and be sworn in. Yes. If you're going to want to speak later, you have to come forward and get sworn in. Yes. You're going to speak. You have to be sworn in. Yes. All right. What, can you speak as well? Probably. Okay. So raise your right hand, please. Do you swear to tell the truth to the best of your knowledge? Yes. Please print your name. Thank you.
All done?
Okay. That's done.
Okay. Here is a summary of the hearing process that we will use today. The HPC administrator provides an overview of the application. The applicant or representative presents the application. Proponents and opponents who receive notice of the hearing can present evidence. Rebuttal is allowed by the applicant and by proponents and opponents who receive notice. Others who can justify that they have relevant information and will be directly affected can present evidence. The HPC administrator presents the staff findings and recommendations. The applicant or representative has an opportunity to make a final comment on their application. The commissioners discuss the evidence and may ask for clarification from the applicant or presenters. The chairman calls for a motion to approve or deny the application with stated findings of fact. The motion is discussed by the commissioners, and the chairman calls for a vote on the motion by the commissioner. A COA can be approved with conditions, or denied. So if we can go to the first application.
Madam Chair, I would like to request that the agenda be adjusted such that item number D become the first item. This is in order to accommodate a member of our staff to be here for that particular item.
Okay. Is there any objection among the commission for us to do that?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
Madam Chairman, I need to be recused from that matter. I got a letter.
Okay.
Madam Chairman, I live in the 500 block of Metcalf, and I request to be recused also.
All right. So we've got you two. Is there any other members on the commission who have had any conversations or any other interaction that is related to this 501 Metcalf Street application?
So, Madam Chairman, as a matter of record, I've had a telephone conversation with Drew Brindbaum, and the nature of the conversation had to do with applicable guidelines as the relates to 501 Metcalf Street. We talked about a fact that they could be interpreted in different ways and maybe could have been written more clearly. Also, we talked about the fact that I believe we will have a presentation of sorts today, and I suggested he contact Matt Shelley to make sure he could be accommodated. And then we also, I advised whether it was solicited or not that the presentation be focused and ultimately relate to the guidelines.
Okay, anyone else?
And I own a bed and breakfast, and my understanding is that the applicant is planning to do a bed and breakfast at that location, even though that does not affect our guidelines, and it's not within our area of concern. My position is a very simple position, that is that I want the rules to be enforced as they are written, and that is regardless of what the applicant has intentions of doing.
Okay. All right.
Madam Chair, point of order, we need to make a motion for our two commissioners who were excused due to receiving a letter. So I move that Ellen and George be excused for 501 Metcalf Street.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Yes, I was going to do that. I was waiting to see if there were other people who had things that they had to say, but I appreciate you moving right along with
All
that.
right.
That's fine.
Because I think this is
Okay.
gonna be,
Okay, so if we could have an overview of the application number D, 501 Metcalf Street.
Certainly. Here we see on the screen is the beginning of the application that was provided before the design review meeting. And this is the second page, signed, and this is too large for the screen. So this is the sketch that you saw at the design review meeting, which is an excerpt from their surveyor's site plan, and shows a arrangement for 2 parking spaces that would allow for turnaround in the backyard along New Street. New Street is at the bottom of this image. The application evolved from there, but we provide here the zoning and building inspections review form, which indicates, that it meets the requirements of the land use ordinance, but requires an SUP, a special use permit, and that the building inspector, a driveway permit may be needed from Public Works Department. And then just as an orientation, these are 2 images of the subject property from the front on Metcalf Street using Street View in Google. So the house, the front portion of the house on the left of the upper picture, and then a front yard, and then behind the front yard is a wing attached to the house towards the back. And then you can see the same at an angle below. Alright, so this is the entirety of the plan, of the site plan that was submitted then after the design review meeting. Prior to the design review meeting, but I neglected to include it in our presentation at the design review meeting. So, and this is an excerpt which outlines the 2 parking areas that I already spoke to on the left, and then the one on the top is shown to be an 18-foot wide, full length, 18-foot wide driveway out to Metcalf Street. That was what was provided before the design review meeting. So these are some photographs that were submitted by the owner as part of their subsequent additions to the application, showing the front of the house. You can clearly see the side wing there and the grassy area now being used for some parking. And again, another one, similar but closer up. This is the landscape area to the left of that area, adjacent to the front porch. And then looking across the front porch towards that parking area, you can kind of see the car parked back here behind the porch and the plantings. Then this is a picture of the back of the subject house with the porch, and this is the area, the grassy area is essentially where that back parking would be. Depending on the orientation, the one that we just saw, the parking would be facing the back porch. This is a picture of the remainder of the backyard, just so you see kind of the size and character of that. This is a photo he submitted to represent the gravel that is what he proposes to use for his surface for the parking, in the back parking parking area. I'm sorry, this is the metal edging that he's planning on using for that same parking area in the back. Closer up to you, sorry. All right. Then the illustration from the packaging showing how at least it bends around and is an edging for drop and lawn. Here is a photograph of his fence from New Street, along New Street. And a closer up shot from the inside, just showing you the structure of the fence. Then from the outside, one section of the fence already has a small gate on it. And his proposal includes a 12-foot wide gate across the driveway, the new driveway that he's proposing. This also shows the hardware that he's proposing to use. That's also a requirement of commission from the design review meeting. And then an example of this looks somewhat like a 12-foot wide or maybe 10-foot wide pair of gates, so you can see kind of how large they are. I'm not sure if he's proposing a curved top on the top or not. It seemed like he was not, but we can clarify that if you'd like. So then he's provided some examples of other parking areas that are similar to his front driveway. This one is on Bern Street. That is an independent living unit there. With a double wide parking lot, concrete with a double wide apron to the street. And also only a single car length depth. This is a similar situation. I'm not exactly sure. This may be on George Street, I'm not sure. Hancock Street, thank you. This one is in front of a garage. There is another one where there is a shed at the end of the driveway and the parking is in front of that. This is a brick treatment here. Also, it could be double wide, I'm not sure. This one is a two-tire track. Example, again, with some kind of structure at the back obstructing the traverse of the driveway. This is another one, a wing on a house. These are all from the historic district somewhere. I'm not always sure where. This one happens to be also on Hancock. Yeah. And that, it's hard to tell if that's two cars would fit on the right side or not. But it's certainly double wide. It's all brick paving. This one is along the side of the house, all concrete or gravel, and a fence. This one is a double wide concrete that just is the length of the car length, probably 20 feet. Does not seem to have an obstruction. And so in the weeks after the design review meeting, the applicant was interested in perhaps changing the orientation of the parking spaces in the back parking driveway. And this was one option that we illustrated to show him what the dimensional requirements would be. So in this case, at the bottom of the screen is driving off the street perhaps, through a gate, and then driving straight into the parking spaces, whereas prior to it was immediately turning right to get into the parking spaces. In this scenario, because he's required to provide a turnaround on the site for these two spaces for his rooms for rent, the bulb or the extra portion is added to the right, and that this sketch provides all the dimensions for that. This also includes what's called an aisle space behind the two spaces, which is 24 feet long. And I guess you can see the arrows here. That's from the back of the parking space here down to this dash line. It's 24 feet. That would be the required aisle space. Whereas the dark line is the space that's necessary to make the motion or to make the maneuver. So you pull in, and then when you're ready to go, you have to go back into curve here is where your tires would probably track or close to it in order to get out going that way. So, then this is the subsequent site plan which the applicant provided. There we go. Which now shows that configuration shown on the site plan. It looks like this is paved, but this is not. This is just two dimensions that happen to match up with one. So the edge of the pavement, or not pavement, sorry, the gravel or the metal edging would be along this where the arrow is, come here, come down here, come across here, and depending on whether it's deemed necessary, could curve down to pick up the rest of this 24-foot aisle and then out the gate, and then back up on this side, 10 feet away from the property line as required by code, and then back across to this corner right here. That's the back one. The front one on this sketch is not changed because the surveyor was not given the new configuration, which you'll see in a minute for the front driveway. All right, that would be this one here, which is Mr. Rush's sketch to give an idea as to what this is, what he's planning to do. It has some dimensions on it, but it's not to scale. So we ended up drawing it to scale. I'll show you that later. This is also accompanied by a landscaping area adjacent to the property to the north, I believe that is, or right next to that front driveway. And so this pretty much complies with the zoning requirements for screening a parking area. These are plants that are selected out of the suggested planting list for this in zoning ordinance, and also meets a criteria for a buffer in this case. So here is a quick sketch of that representing the new design for the front driveway on top of the old design in red. So the two parking spaces are shown in a rectangle on the left, and then the driveway narrows down to a 10-foot wide throat, so to say, or driveway out to the street. So I'd like to summarize a little bit. This is a drawing which shows the areas of visual concern. The purple area represents the primary area of visual concern. The orange area represents the secondary area of visual concern, and the green area represents the tertiary area of visual concern. It could be debated whether or not the primary area of visual concern actually stops along this line or not. So that's perhaps debatable, but it may be moot. We'll see. So then we've overlaid on top of that the current proposals by the applicant. So you see on the left, we have the driveway that we were just talking about in outline, potentially including that 24-foot aisle corner. And then we have a gate in the fence. You can kind of see the yellow, always bad choice to choose yellow. A yellow showing the gate that's in his existing fence. He's, for a while I had thought that he had been meant to replace the entire fence, but he does not. He's just repairing a couple spots on it. And so the existing fence will remain, and he's just adding a 12-foot wide gate for the driveway. Then at the top right is the landscape area that I referred to. That's the location of it along the northern property line. And then lastly, the double wide parking space with a single wide driveway out to the street. And I think, so that does it, except,
let the applicant speak because there's a place down here for us to do the staff's findings. Is that what you're asking?
Right.
Yes. Yes, we'll let other people speak and we'll hear that, and then we'll hear the staff findings.
And the opposition will want to speak as well.
Yes.
So,
Okay, thank you. All right, so if the applicant would like to do their presentation?
Good evening. My name is Gregory Rush. I live at 501 Metcalf. Matt did a good job presenting. I'm here for questions. The double-wide driveway parking spot was made wider because I have to have my parking, part of it behind the house versus a single parallel driving parking spot. So that's why it's wider. I originally applied a year ago for this driveway. It was approved for a 10-foot wide driveway. And at the time, I did not apply for the special use permit for a bed and breakfast. And at the time, I found out I had more restrictive parking requirements for 2 guest parking and 2 personal parking. And that's the reason I had to widen the driveway. And it was suggested at the last HPC meeting that I maybe taper it to give it a more attractive appeal from the front vista of the property. And I follow all the guidelines that the city told me to follow. I use their measurements and sizing. So I'm open to questions that you may have. I think the presentation speaks for itself as far as what I'm planning on doing. And if you have any questions, I'm here to answer them.
We may have some questions later when we get to our part to do that. So is there anything else you'd like to say at this point in time?
I would just like to come back at the end to
You will have, through this process, you'll have a chance to come back.
no, I'm just complying to the standards of what is required of me for the bed and breakfast and special use permit, and I have complied to that. So, and then drawings speak for what I'm going to do.
Okay? All right.
Thank you.
So, is there testimony from any persons who have been notified that are proponents of this? And if you want to come and speak, please give your name and your address and identify, when you come to speak, what HPC guideline you are speaking to. So you need to speak to a guideline if you're going to come up and give any testimony. Are there any proponents who wish to come and speak?
Yes, my name's Danny Batten. I'm the adjacent property owner on the back side of his property. As far as the HPC guidelines, I'm not really sure. All I know is that Gregory's done a pretty good job of keeping me informed of what he's doing. I've looked at the plans. I know that he's worked with the city, the development services, and the planning board, and I really don't have any problem. I don't see any issues with it.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, so can we have testimony from any notified opponents of this? And again, I ask that you speak to a guideline if you're going to give us some testimony, okay? Please give your name and, as this young man did, where you are located according to this house.
My name is Andrew Bern. I live at 505 Metcalf Street. My house is about 15 feet from where the front parking lot will be. What you see in front is, I'm going to speak to all of those bullets. I'm going to speak to structures on adjacent properties. I'm going to speak to street mass proportion scale. Mainly what I have to show you is pictures. I don't have words, I have pictures. And I ask that you look and I will relate them all back skip some slides because I want to go straight. Well, I want to say this is a picture right now of where we are, just so that we're all clear. There was a 10-foot COA that's expired. This is the situation as it is currently. Now, what I want to do is skip straight to what this will look like. Now, those 4 cars you see in the picture, the site plan has changed a lot. It's probably changed like 5 or 6 times, so it's hard to know exactly. At one point, there was an 18 by 41 foot big rectangle. I think you saw that in one of the early site plans. What I have done is, in conjunction with my neighbors, is hired a graphic designer. The graphic designer has shown what 4 cars in that space will look like. So I'm going to show you pictures, everything from the shadow line up is accurate. And then I'm going to, after I show you the pictures, I'm going to specifically show adjacent properties. So I'm taking all this guidance completely to heart. You will not see me meandering anywhere. So the first thing I want to point out here and talk about is the 18-foot apron. The 18-foot apron does not exist anywhere on Metcalf Street, on the 500th block or the 400th block. The picture you saw on Hancock Street is of an infill house. That was an empty house for years and years and years. So it was a double lot. That is very much an outlier. You will not find an 18-foot anywhere in Metcalf, nor will you find it on New Street between Metcalf. And I think this gives you an idea of just how wide 18 feet is. It's almost the size of an Escalade. This is accurate. It goes out on the site plan all the way to where the phone pole is. And I know it's not your concern, but it will eliminate 1 1/3 street parking because it's so big. It's a car and a third, and it pushes the second car off. I know that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. Here's another graphic design depiction. There's no landscaping there to be put in, but this is very close. I think it will probably be shoved a little bit more forward. This is a very close depiction. The porch here, this is my house. So as I said, I'm about 15 feet away. This is a depiction of 3 cars in that area. It's designated 2, but it certainly has room for 4 or 5, and I've talked with Matthew to confirm that. Now, what I want to do is now bring this around to comparing to adjacent structures, because that's really the part and parcel of what we're talking about. This is 520 New Street. So this is directly across from 501 Metcalf. This is where Bern is. And if you look in the bottom right, you can see that's where their parking is. It's tertiary parking. It's in the backyard. And what we'll see is that every one of these, what I call grand corner houses, they use tertiary parking without exception. And I'll just go through those quickly. That's 520. You're going to hear from Jim Howell. This is the John Hawkes house. So this is catty corner to 501. And you can see the parking here is also very much around the side. And Jim is here and he can explain a little more, but there's no parking anywhere in the front or the secondary. It always goes around. This is the third house on the corner. It's not a big house. It doesn't have any parking, nor has anyone attempted to put parking in the front yard. Another famous house, Emily and George's house. You can see that the parking is they could easily put front lawn parking for 10 cars, but you can see that the parking here, like all the grand corner houses of New Bern, is tertiary parking, so it winds around. Here's the Academy house, not the Academy itself, the Academy house. You can see that it kind of goes to the left and goes back and around. So again, this is the comparison, and I'm bringing this back to relationship to other structures on adjacent properties, the street and historic districts. Mass, proportion, scale, style, they don't match. Or I guess the appropriate word is they are incongruous. All right, now, this is every driveway on the 500 block of Metcalf. I didn't go to Bern Street, I didn't go to these are every last driveway. And what I want you to notice is that these driveways, almost to the driveway, they're 10 feet, and then they have a 1-foot flare on either side for a 12-foot entrance. So an 18-foot apron is half again as wide. That's how wide 18 feet is. It's huge. It's an escalator. So there's one. Here's another one. This is next to Carolyn and Zach's house. You'll hear from Carolyn. And you can see it's between the houses. Everything is always between the houses. Here's another one. I think this actually is George's house. It's between the houses. And what's behind it is a dependent structure. It's an apartment. The other one we looked at, the proposed site plan, the kitchen is behind the apartment. So there are some dependent structures, not many on Metcalf, but nothing is truly in front of a living area, whether it's a kitchen or a bedroom, or it just does not exist. I'm not sure what the right term is. Accessory structure. Yeah, they're almost always separate. In one case, I believe, of the pictures that the applicant has shown, there was a porch. But everything else was sort of either an office or a cottage or an apartment, something, but not living area. So this is, I think this is Kelly and Les. There's sort of this, way back there's a garage and storage area. This one is on the other side of Carolyn and Zach. So this is again a 10-foot wide. This one is in brick. I think this is Lorelei, and I think you're going to hear from Lorelei too. Again, it's between the houses. And you notice except for George, there are no structures behind there. The applicant's pictures, which I'll show you in a second, they have structures behind there, and there are different parts of Newburgh, but they're never part of the core part of the house. They're never a living room. They're always like what I would call it. I think the term is accessory or dependent structure. So we've looked at the grand corner houses, and now, here, relationship to other structures on adjacent properties, the street and the historic districts. On the left is what is going to happen. On the right is what exists today. And I would submit that just the same way the corner houses were not congruous with the site plan in front, they're also not congruous with the way that every single house on Metcalf Street parks its car between the houses. I mean, they're all 10-foot with 2-foot, nothing is anywhere, close to 18 feet. All right, now, Matt showed the houses submitted by the applicant. I want to be honest here, this was a bit of work because there were no addresses that were listed. There were no full views of the house. Nothing was chosen from Metcalf Street. No corner houses were chosen. So the work that was done, again, to meet these guidelines is, on the left, this is what Matt showed. On the right is the front view. So you can see there's an apartment. It's not on the front lawn. It's not anything close to the front lawn. It's around the side. There's an apartment there. And this is down on Bern Street. This is 4 long blocks away. Everything that I showed you before was either Metcalf or between New and Hancock. Okay, here's another one that Matt showed. So the full view, I'm sorry, excuse me, that Matt showed on behalf of the applicant. This is actually commercially zoned property. This is 406 Hancock Street. So really, this had no place in there to begin with because it's commercial parking. But even then, you can see that in the larger picture, it goes way in the back, and if it's, I don't even think it's larger than 10 feet, but even if it were, it's commercial parking. The applicant showed this one. This is where I said before, one of them has a porch. So this is 410 Metcalf Street, and you can see, again, it's between the two houses. It's never, it's never on the front lot. Here's another one. You can see that when you look at the full view, this is 615 New Street. When you look at the full view, the parking is nowhere in the primary AVC. It's way in the back. This was actually an interesting one because it had no address and it was really hard to find. But when you look at the full view, this is on 501 George Street. The front door is what you see on the right. What you see on the left where the driveway is that's when you kind of turn the corner. So put in its proper context, it's nowhere near the primary AVC. And I think I talked about this before. This was an infill house on a double lot. The double driveway was approved. I wasn't involved with that, why it was, but it's an infill lot. And infill lots are just always different. They had been abandoned, or not abandoned, it had been empty for many years. And then it was brought in. But it's not comparable in any way to anything on Metcalf, really, or on Hancock. It's sort of at the top of, near the top of Hancock. Okay, so I'm gonna stop talking pretty soon, but I want to summarize. This is what I want to say is this site plan that you're looking at here, an 18-foot apron, where you can easily get 4 or 5 cars. It may not be exactly the same design, but it will be pretty darn close in front of the kitchen in the primary AVC. Is that congruous with all the things we've seen? This is right next to 501. The John Hawkes house, right next to 501. They all have beautiful curved driveways and relationship to other structures on adjacent properties. From the rules of procedure, the Preservation Commission's primary responsibility is to prevent changes in a historic district that would not be congruous, parentheses, not in keeping with the special character of the district. And so, and here, this is Metcalf Street. I had to include this. This is our street. And what I wanted to say, I wanted to close with 2 things. What I wanted to close with is, I realize this is largely about structure and visuals and things like that, but it does talk about the street. And the street means something, because the streets in New Bern are all different. 500 Metcalf Street is different from 400. King Street seems like it's a world of its own. The east part of New Street and the west part of New Street, Front Street, they're all neighborhoods, and they all have their own qualities. Metcalf Street on the 500 block has a quality. It has an ebb and flow. It does have a presence, and I'm not going to get maudlin here, but what you see in the bottom right-hand corner, it's not only discordant or not congruous with everything that we see in corner houses and driveways, but it's incongruous with the life that has been built on that street. And in closing, I want to say just one thing more, and then I'll stop for sure. And that is, we have no quarrel whatsoever with the backyard parking. And you know what? I think we've made our peace with the fact that it will be a 2-bedroom Airbnb. So I think, I'm just throwing this out there, that if the applicant would just use his backyard parking in one of the Airbnb spaces, for his personal parking, I think you won't get any quarrel from us, or at least you won't get any quarrel from me. It's just that the front yard, as shown in these pictures, it's just incongruous on so many levels. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Is there there anyone else who would like to provide testimony from a notified opponent of this application? Is there anyone else? If you would give us your name and address and what specific HPC guideline you're speaking to.
Sure will. My name is Sherry Jones, and my husband Dan and I reside at and own 507 Metcalf Street. And I'm going to be referring to HPC Rules of Procedure, page 5. A Preservation Commission's primary responsibility is to prevent changes in a historic district that would not be congruous with the special character of the district. This has been our home. 507 Metcalf Street has been our home since 1986. We are the longest residing homeowner on the 500 block. Through the years, the 500 block has come a long way. People have bought and restored these lovely homes, and we are proud to be on New Bern's Historic District walking and trolley tours. We've enjoyed many great relationships with our neighbors. And I had a overhead, but you can see it on the screen now. We have an annual Metcalf Street block party. We didn't last year because of a girl named Florence, but you know, we like to do that each year, and it's not too late this year. But more to the point, I've watched and reviewed the HPC meeting of August 15th, 2018, and I want to point out that the applicant and owner of 501 Metcalf Street said at that meeting under oath, and it's on record, that he had no plans to open a bed and breakfast. We are now here today looking at a site plan that quadruples parking in support of a 3-room bed and breakfast. And I'd like to point out that the certificate of appropriateness obtained last August had specific conditions for paving and landscaping. Not one single condition was met in 14 months, and here we are again. At the risk of being rude, when does this end? Will we be back here in another year as the 501 owner requests even more parking? But I don't want to rehash history. It's done and dusted. But what I do want to talk about is this new site plan we've all just seen. First, I have no issues with the backyard parking at 501. That parking is fine, and access comes from New Street, where there is an existing curb cut. I've been in my home for 33 years, and every homeowner before the current owner utilized the backyard for parking, and I know this for a fact. But I do have a real issue seeing how the front parking area can possibly be considered congruous with neighboring houses, street activity, and existing houses. The sheer amount of paving alone in a front yard will be highly incongruous with all neighboring houses where we have simple paving of 10-foot drives where the driveways are all nestled between homes. You've all seen the pictures Mr. Birnbaum has shown of existing driveways for both large corner homes on Metcalf as well as the smaller homes in between. How could a parking lot for 4 or 5 cars situated on a front lawn directly in front of a kitchen not be considered incongruous with all the existing homes and driveways which have existed for decades and generate the unique chart of our street? Everyone on Metcalf Street feels strongly about the incongruity of the site plan. The only people who appear to support it live on New Street and other streets and really have no skin in this game. We felt so strongly about this back in July of this year that everyone's house on Metcalf Street, with the exception of one, that home the owner was deceased and the mother was selling the home and didn't want to take a position, but we all signed a notarized statement asking to be rezoned so our neighborhood would not be subjected to what we're facing today. A site plan that introduces a parking lot unlike anything found on New Metcalf Street or anywhere nearby. A site plan introducing structural elements wildly discordant with adjacent properties, and a site plan with its introduction of as many as 6 or 7 cars totally incongruous with Metcalf Street and the ebb and flow of life here. But here we are again, asking that the board honor its overriding responsibility, quote, to prevent changes in the historic district that would not be congruous with the special character of the neighborhood, end quote. Let me be clear on one thing. While none of us are happy with the arrival of a bed and breakfast, we can perhaps live with it. But we ask for a compromise here from 501 Metcalf Street's owner. Please, please don't destroy our streetscape and street character that's been built up over so many decades. Please walk the extra short distance from the backyard parking to the house like so many of us already do and have for years. We'll all be better people if we can arrive at this accommodation. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone else who has testimony who is a notified opponent? I see some walking this way, so I guess the answer is yes, there is someone else. Sir, if you can give us your name and address and what HPC guideline you're going to refer to.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I must say, from having been on this position a number of times, you certainly punish elderly people by not having enough light up here to see our notes. So if there's any recommendation I can make that would be helpful for the elderly to see what we're speaking from would be very helpful.
I think that may have to be the city, the city that you would have to talk to about this.
All right,
We
well, let's
kind of
talk to
just
the city then.
rent this space
My name
once
is
a month, so.
Jim Howell,
Yeah.
Howell. I live at 517 New Street, which is the Hawks House, which is being occupied actually when the palace was being built, and the Hawks family was raised in that house. So it is of great historic significance. It's probably one of the oldest, if not the oldest house in New Bern. It dates back to 1760. I'm here to talk briefly about this issue of congruence, but as an economist, we like to use a different concept. As an economist, we always want to talk about the direct and indirect or spillover consequences of a particular decision. Let me just briefly go through those two. In terms of the direct consequences of this decision, it's obvious to anyone who looks at this that there's a significant impact of this proposed investment. So much so that it almost suggests, not almost, it does suggest to me that this leaves the character of a residential neighborhood to make it almost a commercial neighborhood. Let me repeat, the direct investment of the impact of this is more of a profound change in the neighborhood to a commercial endeavor, not a residential. Because the direct effects are so significant, the spillover effects in the neighborhood are significant. Spillover effects have effect in congestion, traffic, all sorts of things such as that. Plus, the general atmosphere of the neighborhood will be dramatically changed by this commercial property. Well, let me conclude briefly here with comments about decision making. In life, one makes a lot of decisions. We make it all the time, and oftentimes it's easy to make a decision, but it's almost difficult to ascertain the consequences of those decisions. It seems to me that when we get down to the bottom line and look at this decision, that you're confronted today in this proposal before you, an either/or. Either you can disagree with this proposal and ask it to be changed in some fashion, and therefore retain the integrity of the historic district, which a lot of us attach great importance to. Or you can approve it more or less as it is, and I'm afraid that if that happens, that this will be an initial step into the commercialization of the historic district and the integrity of that neighborhood that we attach so much importance to. If you take the R, the one of making the decision to the commercialization of this property, it seems to me that one can conclude that you run the risk, and I as a resident of that area, of this becoming a minor footnote in the dynamic affairs of New Bern. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who has been notified? And I see a gentleman getting up and coming this way, so that's the answer to my question. So if you could give us your name and your address and the HPC guideline that you are referring to.
Madam Chairman, my name is Dan Jones. I live at 507 Metcalf Street. I am referencing the guidelines identified by my wife previously in red, as well as those identified by Mr. Birnbaum.
Thank you, sir.
As my wife stated, we've lived there since 1986. This is a new construction. Many people don't know that. We saw this house built. We are the first and only occupants of this residence. And we're very proud of it. And it's so interesting to watch as folks go by and look at our house and wonder, how old is that house? About 30 years. And the interesting thing about this house, before it was approved, it had to be in the keeping, congruent with the neighborhood. So a federal box house style was adopted. And one of the interesting side notes about this property is the property is narrow, but it's deep. So the house had to be situated sideways. So the front door is actually to the left. Again, it was not approved until there was an opening, a door onto Metcalf. So the contractor rode the neighborhood, again for congruence, to find a porch that would work. And if this is another piece of interesting history, the schoolmaster's house over on Johnson is our front porch. So our front door is actually a living room window. So but this is a piece of history. But I point this out, again, to say that we were required to follow the rules of congruence, which we did, happily. We are very proud to be part of the historic area, and we feel somewhat concerned that that is in jeopardy, but that's a different issue. If you will, walk with me down Metcalf Street. Let's begin down Queen Street and progress towards Broad. To the left, as we're walking, beautiful, restored, colorful homes to your left. On your right, restored homes, bright colors. We go a little bit further, I think about the fifth house. You see a beautiful, big, two-story home, which once was a multiple unit HUD home, highly suspected drug activity. It was not unusual that we would have to call the police because of knife fights and other things in the street. That is now a beautiful home. On a little bit further, the Jones house, we'll be hearing more about a little bit later. The driveway entrance to the Palmer Tisdale home is across, again, from us. So, the back, the tertiary parking in the rear. Next to us is a beautifully restored home. I think this is where the Newbern fire came to and stopped. This home, when we got there, was uninhabited, and it was not habitable. The owner put a new roof on it just so he could maintain the house, but it is a beautiful restored house. And then we get back to 501. And I'll come back to that in a second. But on our walk, if you notice, if you visualize, you don't see driveways. You see beautiful structures. You see congruence. You see color. You see a neighborhood. You see a happy neighborhood. But you don't identify a park. Oh, there's a parking lot. There's a parking lot, or there's a driveway. You don't see that, which tells me that the driveway is part of the structure. Therefore, it should be part of your consideration. A driveway is part of the structure. It either enhances or it detracts from the structure, one or the other. All of the driveways on Metcalf Street enhance the structure. The driveway is to the side, to the rear, it's concrete, or it's a beautiful brick design. There are several driveways that are shaped with brick, which is just gorgeous. It's gorgeous. So, we progress to 501. Okay, if you're on the trolley, you're out of town, you're visiting, you're a tourist, and you've been marveling at how neat Newbern is. It's just a neat town. You enter the 500 block of Metcalf. You look to the right. You see the Palmer Tisdale historic home. It's just gorgeous. You look to the left. What would you expect to see? Now, you as guardians of history, of the preservation of history, I challenge you to help us to maintain the history of Metcalf. Look at the congruency. Look at the streetscape. Look at those things. Look at Metcalf. Just look at Metcalf. Look at the nature of Metcalf. Look at the feeling of Metcalf. There is a feel there. When the trolley, I chose Metcalf on purpose as it goes over to Cedar Grove. So I would ask that as you look at the site plans and as you look at the things that are proposed, that you help us to maintain the integrity of Metcalf Street. Your signature will go on what's put there. Remember that. Your signature. You will be identified with what goes in on that property. Nowhere on Metcalf is there a 18-foot width, and nowhere on Metcalf does somebody pull up to an extension to their house. So I challenge you, as you review this and as you consider, please, 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 I plan to stay there for the rest of my life. I like Metcalf. I like New Bern. And I don't want to see things changed. I want to see history preserved. And you are the preservation of history. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else? I see someone getting up. Ma'am, if you'll give us your name and your address and what HPC guideline you're referring to.
Yes, I'm Beth Ann Jacobson, excuse me, 508 Metcalf Street, and I'm also going to be addressing the congruency. My husband John and I live at 508 Metcalf Street. Our 1914 Craftsman's 4-square home is located across the street from the applicant. In 2013, we purchased the Kenneth Jones Jr. home and immediately engaged with your commission prior to beginning any restoration. An application was also made to the North Carolina State Historical Preservation Office, utilizing the state rehabilitation tax credit to assist with the restoration of the home. We are also listed on the National Register of Historical Places. Our home is part of the New Bern Historic District walking tour. It's highlighted because of the 4-square construction of our home. And we are located adjacent to the Palmer Tinsdale House, and the academy is to the rear of us. In working with the state, we not only attended to the accuracy of the outside of our renovations via the HPC, but the interior as well. In particular, our driveway adheres to the historic guidelines, and is constructed to the side of our house in the secondary area of visual concern. It is constructed out of brick strips that match our foundation with grass in the center, and we have a buffer to the driveway with plantings so that our neighbors are shielded from seeing our car. The point I'm trying to make here is that when we moved into the historic district, we took a sense of responsibility. We took to heart the first paragraph of the Historic District Guidelines, which say, "You are a steward to a part of New Bern's and North Carolina's history. As a steward of that heritage, you have a responsibility to preserve and maintain the distinctive characteristics of the property for the future." As my husband and I sit on our front porch and observe the work in 501 Metcalf Street, we can't help but think that the applicant does not take to heart that opening paragraph. If he did and understood that 501 Metcalf Street is part of the fabric of a historic community with its own pace, rhythm, and aesthetic, we would likely not be here today for the second time rehashing the same issues that were in the applicant's previous COA application and outlined in the Commission's 2018 decision. I would like to speak to you for just a moment about what has transpired since the original COA in August of 2018. At that meeting, the applicant was given a retroactive COA permit for trees that he had removed in the tertiary portion of the property. He was granted permission to remove an additional tree in the front of the house, a 10-foot driveway to accommodate 2 cars, not the 3 he'd asked for, constructed with materials that are appropriate to the character of our block, in the historic district, a 6 by 10 foot stoop in the front of the home of wood material, and a rear porch of the same material. Currently, the tree has been removed from the front, and the porch and back has been completed. Today, as you have heard, we have no actual driveway or curb cut, but only the parking of numerous cars on the grass in the front of the home. We have a disintegration of the curb, and most recently, the installation of a set of prefabricated cement steps where the applicant has requested a wooden 6 by 10 stoop. To the best of my knowledge, prefabricated cement steps would not have been received HPC approval. The statements made by the applicant in the 2018 hearing, and I was going to say what they all were, but I'm not going to, along with statements made to neighbors as this project has moved forward, demonstrate a lack of respect for this judicial process of the HPC, a lack of respect for the previous board members who acted on and set up perimeters in good faith on the previous application, and a lack of respect for the neighbors who were impacted by the incomplete nature and lack of adherence to the previous COA. Front lawn parking with living area behind is not congruous with the historic district guidelines. In addition, with corner lots throughout the district, you do not see this kind of parking. It is imperative that we recognize when we live in the historic district, we are stewards of a shared history, and we need to be ever vigilant about protecting that history from highly incongruous structures, alterations, and modern accommodations. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone else who would like to give testimony who has been notified as an opponent to this application? Ma'am?
Madam Chairman, I'm Nancy Paulos, and I'm the president of PLAT, and some of our members who are within the 100-foot jurisdiction for the hearing have asked me to speak on behalf of their interests. And that is on page 15 of the rules of procedure.
And can you give us the names of the individuals who've asked you to represent them?
Yes, please come forward to the microphone. Or you can come to this microphone and stuff. Okay.
And have you been sworn in?
I need to be sworn in, Madam Chairman.
Okay. Yes, okay.
I'll get that.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth to the best of your knowledge?
I do.
Or print your name right there, please.
Is that good?
So if you will give us the names and addresses of the individuals who's asked you to speak to them, for them, and what HPC guideline you will be referring to.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chairman and members of the Commission, for your duties and your volunteerism. I appreciate it very much. My name's Nancy Hollows. I live at 4438 Rivershore Drive, and I have owned property in the downtown historic district since 1980, before your commission was established. I still own property downtown. I have owned a house on Metcalf Street, but I'm here tonight to speak on the behalf of the Birnbaums and the Joneses through PLAT. They are members of PLAT. They live on Metcalf Street at 505 and 507 Metcalf Street. PLAT is an organization that was founded in 2006. And for those who are not familiar with it, its purpose is to protect the character, integrity, and fabric of New Bern's historic districts by fostering and supporting laws and ordinances, rules and procedures, guidelines, and any other government regulation that preserve and safeguard New Bern's historic districts and its heritage, including but not limited to New Bern's Historic District Ordinance, to educate the public on these ordinances and other land use ordinances that threaten the well-being of these districts, and to support new construction that is congruous and sympathetically designed for the historic districts. Did you put that in there?
Yes, it's in and it's on the screen.
Okay.
You need your.
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, sure.
And if you'd like, I can move the slides forward.
Thank you. You're here tonight to talk about an application for 501 Metcalf Street. And that application, as I understand it, involves site plans for this property. I do have a question. I've reviewed the site plans, and I understand that this is in conjunction with, it sort of like pre-qualifies this applicant to go before the Board of Adjustment. Is that correct, Matt? For his B&B
right, so,
permit, special use permit.
It's a two-step, or it's a process that has two separate.
Matt, can you speak up to the microphone?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You will.
So this is a process that is one of two simultaneous processes.
Okay. Do you know how many rooms that the applicant wants to have parking spaces for? Was that dictated in somewhere in the application or in the dialogue with you?
So yes, the dialogue with me and his representations with the 2 parking spaces at the back indicates 2 rooms he's expecting to rent.
Okay, thank you very much. The first slide is a slide picture, and I know you've seen lots of pictures, but they say 1,000 words, don't they? So we need to move through them. This is the 600 block of New Street, and it's looking towards Metcalf Street. New Street is a narrow street. It's a minor street. The traffic is one way, and parking is on just one side of the street. And that is true of New Street from the 600 block all the way down to the 200 block, with the exception of parking in the 400 block, which is in front of First Presbyterian Church. I'm making this statement to let you know how important street parking is. And you can see by New Street that the driveways are not very big. They're just 10 foot wide. And as we move on, we'll come to the intersection on the next slide of Metcalf and New Street. This is the southwest corner. This is 501 Metcalf Street picture at the corner. You see some lovely gardens in the front and landscaping and plantings in the front there. Very attractive. But this is a corner lot. Next slide. This is the facade, the front elevation of 501 Metcalf Street. There is no curb cut there, but you can see from the gravel and the deterioration of the sidewalk that parking has gone on there. These pictures were taken today in the midst in the rain. And you can see a white privacy fence to the very right of that telephone pole. That is Mr. Birnbaum's property. Where the telephone pole is pretty much on the line, as it is in most cases. And so the front portion of this lovely house has grass and a little bit of side yard, but not much. This is a driveway to the rear of the home in the northeast corner of New and Metcalf Street, which Mr. Birnbaum has already spoken to. It is the Palmer Tisdale house. It faces New Street. And it's a corner lot, and the parking is in the rear, just as the applicant has proposed for his house. parking from New Street in the rear. This is looking from the entrance of the Palmer-Tisdale driveway up Metcalf Street. And as you look north from this, not everyone has a driveway. So residents rely on street parking, okay? Some have those 10-foot driveways, some do not. Driveway to the rear of Mr. Howell's house is another picture, and it's at the southeast corner of New and Metcalf Street. And clearly, he's parking behind his home. He's not, comes down the corner lot just like the applicants. Based on the information presented above as evidence, plat supports the New Street parking site for 501 Metcalf Street. The plan is not incongruous with the HPC guidelines 2.7. Now let's go to Metcalf Street. The front elevation of this subject property is in partial view of the house next door. A little bit more of a view. It's 501 Metcalf Street's a lovely house. It's been there for years and years. We've known the people who've lived in it, and it's just a fine house. As you view the second and third houses north of 501 Metcalf Street, which would be the Joneses' house, Mr. Jones spoke earlier, and Mrs. Jones, and then the Gormley's house, there is ample parking from the edge of that driveway cut in front of the Joneses' house to the corner of New Street for 4 large vehicles. I say 4 large vehicles, okay? I did the measurements today. The postman in his van was parked right in front of 501 Metcalf Street, and I took my car and I could put it 3 more times behind that and not even reach the driveway of the Joneses' house, the driveway apron of Joneses' house. So parking is a premium on Metcalf Street. And we need to respect that because allowing for more street parking is important. Adding a driveway on Metcalf will reduce the spaces available on the street to park. And I want to say that one more time. Putting a driveway, even if it's 10-foot driveway on Metcalf Street, it would reduce the number of spaces that people are able to park on the street, public parking. Now that apron that's proposed for 501 Metcalf Street is 18 feet wide, and it's incongruous with the rest of the driveways, I would say, in the historic district, with the exception of some newly constructed things. But in the residential areas of the historic district, it's incongruous. And street parking is very important. Why would you want to take away street parking and give up 2 spaces on the street to park on your front lawn, which there is no evidence in the historic district residential areas where people park in front of their homes? So based on that, and based on the historic guidelines, 2.7, you need to maintain the integrity of the development pattern within the downtown historic district, particularly the residential areas. And that is true of not only Metcalf Street, but Johnson Street, New Street, Craven Street. There's a pattern throughout there. And especially where the Preservation Foundation has done so much work in the 500 block of Johnson Street, the 500 block of Metcalf Street, there are 5 preservation properties with covenants on them. There's been a huge investment, millions of dollars have been gone into these houses north of Broad Street. So for that reason, we cannot support the Metcalf Street entrance to the property. It is incongruous with the guidelines. It does not maintain the integrity of the development of the historic district for that period in time. Our photographs clearly show that such a plan is not going to maintain that pattern development for driveways in the residential zones in the local historic districts. You can even go to Riverside. Driveways are placed to the side of a residence or behind it, not in front of it. Thank you for your consideration, and thank you for your hard work preserving our beautiful city.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who has been notified and would like to give testimony as an opponent to this? Yes, ma'am. I see another person coming. Thank you, ma'am. You would give your name and your house number and what HPC guideline you are referring to.
My name is Diane Filipowicz. I spend 6 days a week at 329 Middle Street in the Historic District, ostensibly doing office work. What I'm really here for, more importantly, I suppose, is that I have been asked to speak here tonight by Drew Birnbaum. And logically, any one of you might say, so what? But I'll just suggest how my remarks might be germane to the discussion here tonight, and that is that for the past 23 years, I've been engaged in architectural practice in the city of New Bern, but prior to that, I served as state architectural historian and state historic preservation planner for the states of North Carolina, Wisconsin, and South Dakota. And I hold master's degrees in the history of architecture and historic preservation planning, as well as in architectural design. I also would like to cite, as have previous people, the rules of procedure on page 5 as the basis for my comments, and those that passage states, a preservation commission's primary responsibility is to prevent changes in an historic district that would not be congruous, and that is not in keeping with the special character of the district. It's my contention that the residential parking proposed by the applicant is not congruous with the historic district, as we've seen in the photographs that Drew presented to us tonight. I think in general, cars are an intrusion in the historic district. Being rational people and practical people, we allow that intrusion in the historic district under certain circumstances. As Drew has shown us in photographs tonight, there are certain people in the historic district, and he's shown us persuasive numbers of people, who, out of a sense of stewardship and commitment, have taken pains to locate the parking in a thoughtful location. It's my contention that the applicant could be a little bit more thoughtful in the location of the parking than he has been, or as he's shown us tonight. And I would specifically ask that the residential parking be moved to the tertiary area of the property along with the commercial spaces. I don't think that that's would put undue hardship on the part of the applicant, and so that's just simply what I think would be more beneficial to the historic district in general and to this neighborhood in particular in appreciating the value of the historic district. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone else who is a notified opponent who would like to give testimony for this application? Yeah.
I'm a resident of Metcalf St. They've been flashing my house on the screen and have to speak.
Say that again.
I'm a resident of Metcalf St, but I was not notified.
No, ma'am, you can't speak just yet. You might be able to speak later on. But right now, we're asking for testimony from notified opponents. That's not you, right?
That's not it.
You did not get a letter. Okay. Is there anybody else who got a letter who would like to speak in opposition to this application? I do not see anyone getting up this time when I ask that question. Okay, so if we can have a rebuttal from the applicant.
Yes, I'd like to state that in their, my opposition, they said I was going to have 5 cars, 3 cars, 4 cars. In the front yard, it's only going to be 2 parking spaces. I also like to state that my house is one of the larger houses, and it's one of the larger lots. So a lot of the houses in Metcalf do not have room for a larger driveway or additional parking. I'm using the space that is allowed on my parcel. It's kind of behind the front yard. It's to the side. The addition is existing. I didn't add that addition, so it is blocking to the backyard. I enter my house from the front door and now the kitchen door, and the parking in the rear there's no real entrance to the back to enter the house. So I'd be walking up and down the sidewalk and around the corner. It'd be really difficult for groceries or any kind of things that I'm always bringing in from work or whatever. I am also in interior design. I do respect historic houses. I moved here to New Bern specifically to live in a historic house. I've met many of my neighbors, and many of my neighbors have been into my house. I've had to entertain them, and they've entertained me. So there hasn't been any. We've gotten along very well. I also want to point out that the reason that I haven't completed some of the work, first, it might be my fault. I did not know that once you got the approval from HPC, that it had a time stamp. I thought I got to town, I knew all these things I wanted to do. I got all my permits right away. I didn't know we were going to have 3 hurricanes and the lack of workers availability. I extensively renovated the house on the inside, and I'm continuing to renovate on the outside. Those cars that you saw, some of them were worker bees, contractors that were there. One of the photographs was Thanksgiving. I had my family here. My guests and my family and my friends will know where to park and abide by the driveway that's set forth. And there is plenty of street parking. As far as the apron goes, that was a measurement that a contractor told me to use. I don't really care what size the apron is, whatever the city recommends as a sufficient apron. It has to be wider than 10 feet, I know, because it has to come in a Y. I don't know if it's 12 or 14 or 16, but whatever the planning says is the appropriate apron, that's fine with me. I have no qualm with making that smaller. It was suggested that I taper the driveway to be more attractive. My parking will be behind the porch, most of it. I have shown you examples of other driveways that have the wider parking spot at the end. And I have also signed petition by other neighbors that live on New Street on the 400 block of Metcalf that are in agreement with what I'm doing, and I could present that as well. And so not everybody is against what I'm doing. I respect my neighbors. I respect this panel. I'm just trying to make my house as pretty as I can and as historically correct. I love being here. I'm not trying to harm anybody. I'm trying to do the right thing. I'm trying to follow the guidelines set forth by planning and zoning and by the city. And this is an acceptable use. And that front yard is really a side yard. It's a front side yard. It's not in the front yard. It's going to be behind the porch. I ask you to consider this. And it takes a long time to renovate a house, sometimes more than a year. And I think my neighbors will admit that I've been working diligently on that. And so the references to that I'm not respecting the house and not working diligently is not true. Before, this house was a tenant house, had many different people stay there. The last one had a Winnebago parked in the front side and the back, had numerous children. It was an eyesore. It was almost going to be a triplex, and the city stopped that. I changed it back to single family. I think you'll be proud of what I do. I too plan to stay here a long time. I too like walking down Metcalf either direction, and my house is one that was recently purchased, and it takes time to renovate it. I haven't dropped any. I'm moving I'm moving forward on any of the renovations I'm trying to do, and I just ask my neighbors to be patient with that. I respect your decision to disagree, but this is my home. I know some people are concerned when they look out their house from the side, like my neighbor, what they see. My neighbor does not have a driveway. The two neighbors next to me, they share a driveway. It's a grassy area. It's not paved. They've been here a long time, 35 years, and one of them's been here maybe 6 years. I've been here a little over a year. I'm working towards completing a driveway that will take parking off the street and allow more parking for residents. By me having parking in a driveway, not a parking lot, in a driveway, will free up parking spaces on the street. I'm not even using street parking, and most of my neighbors are using street parking. So I wish you would consider to accept this as well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
So I call now from rebuttal from notified proponents of this. Is there anyone who would like to speak? A rebuttal for that? Okay, I call for a rebuttal from the notified opponents of this application. If you could state your name again, sir.
Yes, Andrew Birnbaum, at next door at 505 Metcalf Street.
Thank you.
I've jotted down a few notes, but respectfully, I disagree with everything that I've just heard, and I'll just go in the order that I've taken notes.
Thank you.
Whether it's 2 cars, 3 cars, 4 cars, it really doesn't matter. It's primary AVC. It's in front of the kitchen. There's nothing else anywhere that comes close to that. And we do have a fair amount of, there is room for 4 cars. So, and I've had this conversation with Mr. Shelley yesterday. It will be able to accommodate that number of cars, but even if it's only 2 cars, I think we've completely shown that there is nothing remotely similar to what is being proposed. Next point. My wife and I don't have any parking. We park in front of our house. We walk the 20 feet into the front door. I would respectfully submit to the applicant that when we came to this area, when we came to New Bern, we submitted just a little bit of ourselves to the fact that we were going into a historic district. And if it meant walking to the front door, that's what we did. And, I don't sense that that view is shared. And the backyard does have access through a porch. I realize that would not be ideal, and it's not my place to say that, really, but there is ingress, egress from the back. But it doesn't matter. It is not congruous, and that has just been shown on so many different levels. Neighbors. Every single person on Metcalf Street, not New Street, not Hancock Street, not other street, but the 500th block of New Street, Metcalf Street, attempted to rezone the block. This is to say that neighbors are on board and amicable with these type of plans or respectful of these plans is nonsense, just based on the fact that there's that level of a commitment that everyone but one house would sign notarized statements in an attempt to rezone. So I want to make sure that is perfectly clear. The COA letter, I have a copy of it. The COA letter from last year specifically said that on August 21st of 2019, the 10-foot COA would expire. It could not have been more clear. And I know that is part and parcel of any COA process. So to say that there wasn't adequate information, I think is just disingenuous. There was a tremendous, I mean, the whole process here is built around it. It was 1 year, and that's neither here nor there, because we're looking at a new site plan, but nothing happened during that year, and it basically turned into an eyesore, which is why you have so many people who wanted to get away from this. So this all comes back to respect a little bit. We respect totally the owner. He wants to do an Airbnb. He wants to put parking in his backyard. We respect that. We don't like it, but we respect it. We ask that he respect, you know, the 13 houses that tried to rezone, that don't want to have this kind of discordant front lawn parking lot that has absolutely no precedent. So I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you, sir. Is there any other person? I see a person right now. So if you state again your name and your house and what HPC guideline you're going to speak to.
My name is Dan Jones, 507 Metcalf, the guideline that Mr. Birnbaum just addressed. I am here to support totally what Mr. Birnbaum just stated and totally concur. A piece of additional information, the driveway between our two homes, 507 and 505, is paved with marl. It has a grass centerway, but it is paved with marl, for the record. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there any other notified opponent who would like to speak in a rebuttal? Okay. Would you give your name and again tell us who you're speaking for and what guideline that you are going to reference?
Yes, ma'am. I'm Nancy Hollows. I'm President Platt, and I am speaking for our members, the Birnbaums and the Joneses.
Okay.
As a rebuttal to what Mr. Rush said, I have to say that whenever we have had an issue for a COA come before this commission, we have to take context into consideration. You have to stand on the street. You have to look up the street. You have to look down the street. You have to look across the street. You're not going to look at Hancock Street because you can't see Hancock Street from there. And what you see is the context. And this Metcalf Street driveway is incongruous with the context of where it is to be located. Now, Mr. Rush said that he would have to park in the back and walk around to the front to get to the front door. That's not necessarily true. He has ample parking spaces for almost 3 cars in front of his house. And then the Birnbaums have space to where the Jones apron is. So park in front of your house and go in your front door. Or create a pretty path from the New Street parking lot, where your lush vegetation landscaping is, a little brick walkway, to the front of the house for your guests that are parking in the back. I will say what I've seen on his property is beautiful landscaping, and wouldn't it be beautiful to bring that around in front of his kitchen with a lovely pathway to his kitchen porch? I do not see the necessity to disrupt the context of the Metcalf Street driveways, the streetscape, for a driveway and parking in front of a building. It is not congruous with the rest of the street. In the context of that street, all of Metcalf Street, it is not congruous. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who is a notified opponent who would like to make some rebuttal comments? Anyone else? Nobody's going to stand up now? Okay. All righty. So, Now I'm going to call for comments from anyone with relevant information and who has some standing related to this. And ma'am, on the front row there, you had said that you had something that you wanted to say?
Yes.
And you live on Metcalf Street?
And so I just wanted to talk about my perspective and then the relation to the guidelines.
Okay, and where do you live on Metcalf Street?
Diagonal.
Oh, you're diagonal across.
Yeah, like I'm 2 doors down from her. From diagonal. My house was shown in one of the photos.
Okay, but you didn't get a letter?
She's,
She's trying to get 100 feet.
It's not within 100 feet.
apparently her property is more than 100 feet from the subject property.
Okay, so you really don't have standing if she's not within 100 feet. Would that be correct, Matt?
That's correct.
So I guess according to our procedures, I cannot let you give testimony, because you have to have standing of some type. Okay? Somebody back there raised a hand?
Why would not a neighborhood be considered having an interest in this? I live at 520, which is at the end of the block, and I'm very interested in this. I didn't get a letter because I'm not within 100 feet. Oh my God, that neighborhood is very, very tight in terms of its interest in the homes conserving our neighborhood. And while we may not need the letter of the law of having an interest, we sure do care about our neighborhood.
We're going to have a conference.
I'd suggest that you allow people to speak who have not spoken and who have something new to share.
Okay. Okay. All right. So at this point then, if someone has some relevant information that has not already been shared, so anyone who's in the audience who has relevant information that has not already been identified, we will give you some time to come and speak. So, ma'am, do you have something to say that has not already been spoken to?
Yes.
Okay?
If you cut me off if you don't think.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for giving me that permission.
So
Okay?
I will.
So if you tell us who you are and what house you're in and how you're related to this 501.
Okay, my name's Caroline Orman. I live at 512 Metcalf Street.
Okay, you live up the street.
Yeah, so I wanted to speak to the incongruousness and in relation to safety with a driveway that is 18 feet wide. So I don't know if you will let me speak to that.
We haven't heard the word safety yet, so that is new information. If you vary off of that, I'll kind of either bring you back or stop you.
Well, may I go with my prepared?
You can, as long as you stick to safety.
I'll say safety.
Okay.
I am here in regard to the site plan that the applicant has submitted seeking approval for an 18-foot drive in the front lawn of Metcalf Street on 501 Metcalf. He's also seeking a drive behind his home on New Street. The HPC guidelines say that changes in the historic district should be complementary to the special character of the historic district. The guidelines go on to add that relationship to other structures on adjacent property, the street and historic district should be considered. Let me talk for a minute about the site plan's relationship to the street and adjacent property. We have a steady flux of foot traffic. We have skateboarders and bikers and folk training for marathons, and people just simply walking by and marveling their surroundings. We have people walking their dogs, and we have dogs walking their people. More importantly, we have children, and we have the elderly. My husband and I have 2 small children of our own, and there are multiple other children on our street. And as for the elderly, well, none of us are getting any younger. The front AVP parking lot the applicant is seeking is incongruent with the street and the neighborhood, not to mention all the other parking driveways on the street. The volume of cars able to park in this lot is absurd. It creates blind spots. It increases the amount of people in and out of the driveway that are not aware of the neighborhood dynamic. We have already had situations in which cars have been parked in this yard inappropriately and blocking the sidewalk. It is also nerve-wracking for me as a parent to worry about children running down a sidewalk and contending with a parking lot. I really don't want to have to tell my children not to run on the sidewalk. At present, all of the driveways on our street are nestled between homes. No one else has cars parked in the front yard. The neighbors here know who to expect where. When we come and go, we do it with safety in mind. I know that Dan Jones is going to run back and forth in the middle of the road. I know that Dave McConnell is going to walk his dog on my side of the street headed toward Broad. I know that Jim Howell is going to meander back and forth. I know the little 3-year-old across the street is always being cautiously watched by his parent, but it takes a village to raise a child, and I know that I have to watch out for him, too. For the sake of safety, this isn't appropriate. For the sake of the neighborhood, it isn't right. It just isn't congruent. The site plan is not congruent on the physical, structural level, nor is it congruent with the ebb, flow, and rhythm of Metcalf Street. You know, our home doesn't have a driveway at all. I can't stretch out between my house and the house on either side without touching their property. For the 10 years we have lived in this home, we have parked on the street. I've had to park in a spot on Johnson Street. I've had to tote 2 babies and all of my belongings from wherever I found a spot. It has driven my husband mad at times. If you vote to approve this COA and allow this front yard parking lot, and somehow find that this site plan is congruous with Metcalf Street, you are opening the floodgate. You are suggesting that we can tear up our brick walk that we constructed from brick of demolished buildings that we have shipped across the state that we specifically found to match the year that our house was built. I can now have the front yard driveway that my husband longed for. We've never pushed it because we know that to live in this neighborhood is to give up a little. We moved here with a sense of responsibility for maintaining this neighborhood. Members of the HPC, I am now asking you to be a responsible board. Maintain this neighborhood. This site plan is incongruous with the neighborhood. I quote you the HPC Rules of Procedure, page 5. A Preservation Commission's primary responsibility is to prevent changes in a historic district that would not be congruous with the character of the district. You have to tread cautiously here. The move you make sets the precedent. This site plan is incongruous with the special character of the very district that I intend to safely raise my family. Vote according to your own rules and regulations. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anybody else? Okay, sir, if you'd like to come up and give your name and your residence number and what HPC guideline you're going to be speaking to.
My name is Joe Cole. I live at 520 Metcalf Street, which is the opposite corner of Johnson and Metcalf. I have no clue what I'm speaking to because I've only been a resident here for about 1.5 years. We purchased down here because we love the town, we love the historic district, and we especially love Metcalf Street. What I will tell you is I'm probably the only house on Metcalf, that block, that does not have a driveway. My house is the smallest lot on there. And while on Johnson Street, I have a cut-in that conceivably could be made into a driveway, my neighbors would, it wouldn't be congruent with the way that house was set up and the way it currently sits. I have no problem parking on the street. We have 2 cars. We have no problem parking right in front of the house, which I submit is actually closer to getting in the front door than parking in a driveway where you actually have to go around something. The only time we had trouble parking was Mumfest, and probably everybody had a problem on Metcalf parking at Mumfest. And it seems to me that a house of this age, I mean, Gregory's done a beautiful job of renovating the inside. We've been fortunate enough to go in and look at it, and he's done, because we looked at that house before we purchased 520. He's done a beautiful job. For congruency purposes, though, that house, as old as it is, never had a driveway. And now you are asking to change the character of the house by putting a driveway in front of it. So in a sense, it's being incongruent to want him to do something that didn't exist for over 100 years. And it would ruin the quality of our neighborhood. We didn't purchase in New Bern in the historic district to have someone come in and change a house that's been sitting there for that long and all of a sudden put a parking lot on the front lawn. That is just not in character with our community. And I thank you for your time, and I thank you for allowing me to speak.
You're welcome, sir. Okay. So, can we have the HPC administrator provide staff findings and, well, let me see, is there anyone else who wanted to speak first? No. Seeing none, can the HPC administrator provide staff findings and recommendations?
Yes, ma'am. A lot of these we've seen already. Okay, sorry. So for 501 Metcalf Street, to include approval of construction of a residential driveway and parking area and landscaping in the primary AVC along Metcalf frontage, modifications to the fencing in the primary AVC along New Street, and new construction of a driveway and parking area in the secondary AVC behind the house along the New Street frontage. The driveway and parking area along Metcalf Street was previously approved and the COA has expired. So we submit the following historic district guidelines as appropriate to this application. I'll just read the numbers. 2.4.3, 2.4.4, for fences and garden wall, that was for landscaping, sorry. For fences and garden walls, 2.5.1, 2.5.2, 2.5.3, 2.5.4, and 2.5.5. For parking, 2.7.4, 2.7.5. The statements of reason, based on the information contained in the application at the time that the recommendation was written. Instead, staff's judgment are: 1, the proposed residential driveway and parking area and landscaping are in the primary AVC along Metcalf frontage. Modifications to the fencing are in the primary AVC along New Street, and new construction of a driveway and parking area behind the house are in the secondary AVC along the New Street frontage. Secondly, the landscaping and edging proposed are not incongruous with the guidelines. 3, the materials and design proposed for the fencing are not incongruous with the guidelines. However, the height of the fencing should be only 4 feet in the primary AVC along New Street. I'd like to modify that because I've since learned that he's not planning on changing the fencing in any way except adding the gate. So we can strike that. Number 4, the materials and design proposed for the parking and driveway areas are not incongruous with the guidelines. And 5, which would be struck again except for the fence height, 5 would continue then. The proposed project is not incongruous with the historic district guidelines. So the motion that we recommend is that the Commission approve this application for the construction of a residential driveway and parking area and landscaping in the primary AVC along the Metcalf frontage, modifications to the fencing in the primary AVC along New Street, and new construction of a driveway and parking area in the secondary AVC behind the house along the New Street frontage. At this time, with the conditions that the fencing along New Street be reduced in height to 4 feet, maximum citing the aforementioned guidelines, we would, of course, revise that to eliminate the provision, the condition regarding the 4-foot height for the fencing.
Thank you. Does the applicant have any final comments that he would like to make?
I would just like to clarify, the word parking lot's been used a lot, and it's really a driveway with 2 spots. And I'd just like you to remember that it's, and the front side is just 2 parking spots that are side by side, that tapers down to a 10-foot wide driveway. And also that the apron is whatever the city says is the right size. I'm not attached to what size the apron is. And the city did come and lower the curbing already. And I do have a permit for the driveway as well. So I'd like you to consider that I'm following every guideline, and I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Members of our commission.
I have a question for staff, not Matt, zone planning and zoning, because I see it here, about the driveway.
Okay. You have a question you want him to answer?
Yes,
okay.
yes, ma'am.
Sir, if you'll come forward. Tell us who you are, give us your name, and tell us how you're related to this.
My name is Jeffrey Ruggieri. I'm the Director of Development Services for the City of New Bern, and certified zoning official.
Okay.
Okay, we've heard a lot about the apron, the 18-foot apron on that. What is the city's?
Zoning standards would place the width of a driveway between 12 and 18 feet. So 12 would be the minimum. Zoning, not in the historic district, you have more flexibility, but maximum would be 18 feet in a new home built outside the historic district.
Have you looked at this lot, or?
Yes, sir.
And what is your recommendations on it?
For what?
The apron, the 18-foot apron?
On the width of the apron, cursory review, I understand what the concerns are, and that minimizing public parking with the apron flaring out. I would be supportive of something that would not interfere with public street parking as much. There's no need for the big wide apron.
All right, thanks.
You're welcome.
I'm really confused with the, number one, are we bound by the previous COA that we agreed to? That's expired with that. So this is a totally new proposal.
Yes. We are not bound to that. That is expired, that is gone. That is why he's here, because it's expired and gone.
Yeah. And the picture in the package is different than the picture that we're shown in terms of the construction of that front driveway.
Are you referring to the full, let's say the full color one with the purple and the green and the orange, or what?
Well, I'm referring to the one that I downloaded. It looks different than this picture.
Okay. So
this picture in the purple is the one that we're voting on, or has been proposed that we vote on.
That's correct.
So before we get too far into things, my colleague got off on a little bit of a, what I'll call a zoning question. I admire you for that, but we'll talk later. I just want to let you know, I hear what you're saying. I understand what you're concerned about. But I also want to take a moment for people who may be viewing in to understand that things like street parking, traffic, land use residential, commercial, number of parking spaces, and safety are not within the purview of the HPC. We simply have no guidelines that address those things. And so I just share that with you because I want you to understand the conversation that will likely go on. We'll deal with other issues, and Drew, if I may call you Drew, thought you did a pretty good job with your initial proposal or presentation because you kept it to talking about the guidelines. And that's the way we're going to talk tonight. We're going to talk about scale, mass, proportion. You might hear something about development pattern, things of that nature. So I just don't want everyone to leave here disappointed that Tripp doesn't care how many parking spaces are in the yard. We're here looking at parking for a property. And I want you to understand why I don't care. It's because it's not within our purview. It's not because I don't share your concern or that I don't understand what you're asking us to consider. So that kind of said, I feel a little better now because we spent most of this meeting talking about zoning issues, in my opinion, and I'm going to ask my fellow commissioners to help me out a little bit, but I heard a little concessionatory language at the beginning of all this that maybe with a few changes, something might be agreeable to all parties. Matt?
Just to clarify, however, the HPC is empowered to have a motion to suggest or recommend, to the Board of Adjustment that the number of parking spaces can be reduced on any application.
Thank you for that information.
That can be considered as well.
I have a question regarding the application that I'm having difficulty with, and the difficulty is that the drawings that were submitted in the COA application have undergone modifications, and all of the modifications are not necessarily reflected in that COA, are they? Meaning that we had an 18-foot wide driveway that now is tapered, and...
That's correct. So, if I may, sorry. The 18-foot driveway was presented prior to the design review meeting, and then there was some expression of some concern about that, not much, at the design review meeting. The applicant, as applicants do after those meetings, they make changes to their plans, hoping to make it better or more likely to be approved. That's kind of the purpose of that meeting. And so, as a result, he changed the design from 18-foot wide all the way out to the street, down to this tapered design.
I just wanted to make sure that
Correct.
in fact was what the formal
Correct.
application
Correct.
reflects.
And my intent with the package was to show kind of the evolution of the design, starting with what you had seen at the design review meeting, which was just a tiny corner of the driveway in that kind of excerpted sketch, and then out to this. This is the current proposal right now. This one on the screen.
When he describes it narrowing to 10 feet, that speaks to the throat only. The parking area, what I see here is 28 feet wide.
No, so the parking area is 2 spaces, so it'd be 2 9-foot spaces, so it's 18 feet wide,
18.
and then they're each required to be 18 feet long, so it's really a square 18 by 18, and then at that point, then it narrows down to 10 feet, and I think his dimension was something like within a 9-foot distance, it narrowed down to 10 feet.
Yeah.
And then from there, it's 10 feet straight out to the other side of the sidewalk. What this sketch represents is, though, his initial or his dimension had an 18-foot dimension at the curb, and so this sketch does show that. He's now tonight said he doesn't care what size that is.
Well, I think we could put that in as a condition were we to move forward with approving this. We could say that, you know, the curb cut would be no greater than.
What I interpret you were saying is we don't have purview of parking spaces on the, when I, maybe you didn't say that.
Well, I said street parking and number of spaces.
Number of spaces
In other
on the
words,
property.
unlike zoning, we don't say based on this use, you need this many spaces.
Yeah.
We just look at the relationship of perhaps scale, this is in my opinion, obviously, of how parking relates to the property, or rhythm and pattern in terms of curb cuts, perhaps, or things like that.
When I look at that, I see an awful lot of parking area. It's out of proportion to the size of the lot, and then I wonder about what's the limit. Where do you draw the line? Could that whole yard be a parking area? I don't think so.
Well,
so there must be some rational.
I think there is a limit. You know, the maximum is 50% of the backyard could be parking, based on the guidelines
Of the backyard.
Yeah. Well, and to take this thought a little further, it's a little concerning that corner lots are always a problem because they have two primary areas of visual concern. You know, in this case, based on my evaluation, I appreciate the applicant's efforts to respond to commentary we had in design review. I just caution that, you know, we're not very good designers by committee, even though somebody talking right now might have made the suggestion that 18 feet was too wide and you might want to think about narrowing your driveway. But the other thing is problematic about a corner lot is essentially everything shown in purple in the diagram on TV is in the primary area of visual concern. And I kind of get a lot of anxiety of having parking that could be debated to be in the primary area of visual concern.
Well, and I think we have a specific guideline that says thou shalt not.
So I think
the saving grace for the parking behind the structure is that the cars will be parked in, at most, the secondary area of vehicle concern, but actually tertiary, because it's truly behind the house. The entrance would be through a primary.
Well, which always happens.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think this is speaking to what many of the persons who have spoken today about the streetscape, what all the other houses on this block have. And sir, you gave us a picture by picture of what all these other houses have. They either have no driveway. Young lady talked about that. She has no driveway. She's been parking on the street for how many years? 8 or 9 years? 10, okay. And the fact that some of the houses have to share a driveway, and that all of these driveways go to the back of the property, so that there are no other houses on this street that have the capacity to have a parking lot, driveway, whatever name we're going to give this, in the front of their house. I think there's one. There's one of you who said that. Am I remembering that right? You said you could have done that, but you didn't?
Yeah, I'm saying you could.
You could have done that, but you did not, to respect the scale and mass and proportion and the congruence of the block and the congruence of the historic district. So you did not choose to do that. That was one of the points that you were making. So I think that, and everybody that has spoken in terms of the congruence or the incongruence of this, and have made that point that there's nothing else on this block. And as I'm sitting here thinking, if you go south, because you can't go north, okay, because there's a church up there, across the street up there. But if you go south, there's not parking in anybody's front street, front parking lot, front yard south of this. There's parking on the street. There's a house down there on the left if you're walking south that has a porte-cochere on the side. And last time I've driven by there, their car wasn't already in there. So there's no house down there that has parking. Now, if you get to Broad Street, if you go south, there is parking that is related to the church. Okay, so there is parking on that corner there that is related to that church. But there's not parking in anyone's front yard. So this would be a very aberrant visual effect if this was the only house, I'm saying, in 2 blocks that would have this. Do you all understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Chair, my concern is just with the guidelines, 2.7.3, talking about primary AVC, and I know it's saying, a dense. That's, to me, it seems like that this would. It's almost in violation of that because.
If I may. 2.7.3 refers to the dense fabric pattern. That is the downtown. It's defined in the guidelines as the downtown area where you have your commercial buildings. This area is not that. It is the tight weave development pattern. That is the other kind of development pattern.
Okay.
So that actually doesn't apply to this case.
As a point of process, do we have the option of voting parts of this to be okay, but not others?
We can vote. So we have an option to do the following. We can approve it. We can approve it with conditions, which would be, I think, what you're asking. We can deny it. Or I think I'm correct in saying that we can ask for this application to be brought back to us. Can we not do that?
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yes, that's correct.
So we can. And what word do I want to use for that?
A continuance.
Continuance is the official word.
Yeah, but before you do that, Ruth, I want to get back to your description of what you're seeing. I think I can simplify that by simply saying that this is a corner lot and 2 improved driveways are too many for a lot of that scale. In other words, if all the parking were in one place, preferably based on development pattern, not in primary areas of visual concern, I think it would solve a lot of the problems that we're dealing with tonight and maybe come to some kind of resolution that not only the applicant may be agreeable to, and I'll ask in a moment, but also maybe some of the neighbors might be somewhat agreeable to, and that essentially getting that parking behind the fence.
We can figure the rear one.
Where it's not as visually, where it's not as visually apparent, I think is the word I'm looking for.
I would like to modify our recommendation.
Yes, sir.
And this may help. I'd like to recommend, in addition to the language about the rear driveway and the landscaping and the fence gate, that the parking spaces be moved to the rear parking area, but that the HPC also recommend reducing the number of spaces required for the residential use to 1 instead of 2, resulting in 3 spaces in the rear yard and 0 spaces in the front yard.
That is y'all's recommendation. So
Yes.
3 spaces in the rear yard. And decreasing the number of occupant spaces to 1. Sorry? Owner, occupant, okay.
Given his potential request to become a bed and breakfast, occupant could be anybody who stays there.
Thank you for that, okay. So I get the language correct. Okay, so you are now recommended that he have 3 spaces in the rear, and that we reduce the number of owner occupant spaces to 1.
Resulting in 3 in the rear and 0 in the front.
Okay, and none in the front. Okay, so 3 in the rear and none in the front. That's your recommendation now.
Right.
Okay?
Okay, now, our board members, how is that going to affect the 50% tertiary AVC?
Just based on the proportion of green that's in the backyard there,
You believe it's
will not violate the 50%,
Okay.
in my opinion.
Okay.
All right.
You could make that a condition as well.
All right.
Any other discussion among ourselves? Okay, so the staff is now recommending 3 spaces in the rear, and there is enough room with land to do that. Reducing the number of owner occupant space to 1, and no parking in the front. That is your recommendation.
Right.
Okay. So do we have someone on the board here who would like to?
Oh, no spaces in the front.
Yes, no spaces in the front.
I move that we find the application for 501 Metcalf Street for a certificate of appropriateness to be not incongruous with New Bern's Code of Ordinance sections 15411 to 15429 and New Bern Historic District guidelines based on the following specific guidelines and findings of fact. Landscaping 2.4.3, 2.4.4, fences and garden walls 2.5.1, 2.5.2, 2.5.3, 2.5.4, 2.5.5. Parking 2.7.4, 2.7.5, and most importantly, did I miss one?
Can we just add 2.7.2?
And 2.7.2. Statement of reasons. The property is on a corner and a single drive is appropriate. Second reason being that a consolidated parking area that's behind an existing screen is preferable. Well, I think that's enough reasons. And with that, the condition being that there are 3 parking spaces, I believe it's to the north side of the lot, is that correct? Turn the right way?
Yes.
West side of the lot, and with 0 parking spaces and/or driveway improvements on
Facing
Metcalf Street.
And reducing?
Yeah, 3, 0.
Okay.
Oh, and then lastly, that as part of this motion, that we encourage the Board of Adjustment to reduce the number of parking spaces required for this particular property.
Second motion.
To the owner occupant space to 1, is that what you meant to say?
Well, I don't care how you use them. There are 3 on the west side and none out front is what I care about.
All right.
Do you also have findings of fact for the landscaping and the edging and the
landscaping and
the
edging
materials?
are traditional materials that are used in conventional ways as readily observed in the district.
Okay, a motion has been made. Is there a second?
Second. Yeah, I'll
Is
second it.
Is there any more discussion that we would want to do about this? Any more? Okay. Is there a motion being made, call for a vote? All those in favor of this motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? None? So there's none opposed to it?
Mr. Klotz, were you an aye? Were you in favor?
Oh, I was an aye, yes.
Yes, he was an aye.
I'm sorry.
Okay, all right, I was wondering I thought there's somebody down there I don't see. Okay? So the COA has passed with the conditions that have been stated. Okay, so can I call for a motion to issue a COA?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, can I call for a vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? None. Hearing none, the COA is passed as the conditions have been put on it. Thank you all very much. We will go to our next item.
Oh, I move that we allow our comrades to rejoin us.
Okay?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Scott Davis. Well, it's just, yeah, some of them did, some didn't. I know. The philosophy is, people come here, man, they come here, and that's kind of our job, to let them air out their stuff. That's the right thing to do. Just a way to do it.
Thank you.
So that's a good way.
Sure.
You're the chair. Yeah, whatever you want to do.
So I believe that we will take a 10-minute break. It is now, let me see, it is now almost 8 o'clock, and we've been here since 5:30. So we're just going to take a little 10-minute break to get some water, something to drink, bathroom, and then we will be back, please, promptly in 10 minutes, and we will start again. Thank you. Okay, I am calling us back to order. Okay, and let us start, we're going to start with A?
Yes, that's
Okay,
correct.
we're going to start with A, 513 New Street.
513 New Street is to include construction, they're here now, include construction of a new detached outbuilding in the Tertiary AVC. This being the application, signed an old site plan that's been modified to the sketch of where the structure is, not to scale, but with dimensions, 51 feet from the house, 15 feet from the rear yard, and 20 foot 8 inches from the right hand, which looks like it's the west property line, and 32 feet from the east property line. So plenty of room, space between them all. Oops, why does that say 8 feet over there? Let me go back up. Did I misread? Oh, yes, that's not 20 feet 8 inches to the west property line, that's 8 feet. It's 20 feet is the dimension of the building. The building is 20 feet by 24 feet. So that's the floor plan, just a simple square, just a simple square with the, now this is going to collapse. Self-destruct. All right, don't touch it. Okay. And the house is to the south, or to the bottom of the drawing. This is the floor plan. Oh, I guess the other one was the foundation plan. It's just a slab, concrete slab. This is the roof plan. Why does it say foundation plan? What was the first one? They're both floor plans? I don't know. Okay. Then we have a front elevation. This is the elevation that faces the house. They also notate, if you can't see that, pillow wood windows with shadow bars. And the slope on the pent roof on the big front is a 6 and 12 slope. Here they notate 6 and 12 slope on the main portion, and they also notate fiber shingles and hardy siding. This is the, the east elevation. The rear being the south elevation, and this being the west elevation. I believe, am I correct? Yes. So this is just a section of the construction. May or may not be relevant, but does show the 16-inch overhangs for soffit and shows the slab. All right, this is the house, the primary structure, and it also has that kind of pediment porch roof on the front. This is the spot, or part of the area where the shed will be. The shed, or the accessory outbuilding, will be larger than this pad here, but this is where the location is. You can see the distance to the house. Again, from the side, there's a fence on the opposite side there to the neighbors, and then at the bottom we can see the view towards the back. And then this is our zoning and inspections review form. On this one, it meets the requirements of the land use ordinance, and it will require a building permit. So, and these are our findings and recommendations if you're ready for those. Or shall I wait?
We'll wait till we get down here.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there any conflicts of interest here on the board? Anybody, any issues or concerns about completeness of the application? None having been voiced. If the applicant wants to present the application?
I'm John Mitchell. I live at 513 New Street. First time we were here, you asked for a piece of shingle, what the shingles would look like.
I'm sorry, hold on. We didn't get to swear him in the first time.
Oh, okay.
Nobody signed it.
All right. Do you swear, go ahead if you want to use the Bible. Do you swear to tell the truth to the best of your knowledge?
I do.
Okay. And please print your name on there, please.
Okay. Okay. When we were here before, you wanted to see what the shingles would look like. They're going to match the house. I brought half of one. I didn't want to bring the whole thing. I think they call them timberline. And Coastal Exteriors had put the roof on the main house, and Mr. Dixon's the contractor. He's going to use the same shingles for the roof. Then you wanted information on the door that would be the entrance into the garage, and we've got that information here, if you want to look at that. It'll be a fiberglass door. Yeah, fiberglass door.
Would you like to display it on the screen so they can see that?
Just specs on the material that goes into it.
Okay. Well, you can talk to the spec sheet if you'd like.
I have no idea what all that means. Yeah.
I can help out a little bit here. Let's see on this. So here at the top, it mentions a 3.0 by 6.8 Thermatrude door, fiberglass smooth star 6-panel. So, and these are some tests and certifications for the doors. This is the actual kind of spec sheet. Tells about fire resistance and all of that. does not describe the materials that I can see real quick. And then this one is Energy Star classification. So primarily, I think it was the initial information at the beginning, fiberglass smooth star 6-panel.
Just trying to build an outbuilding to store lawn equipment and tools in. It'll be used as a workshop.
Okay. So, is there any testimony from anybody who was a has been notified, who is a proponent of this? Anybody who has been notified who is an opponent of this? Okay. Would you like to say anything else, sir? Okay. We have no proponents or opponents of this. Is there anybody else that would like to speak to this COA? Okay. We will have the HPC administrator give us staff findings.
Okay. So for 513 New Street, to include construction of a new detached outbuilding in the Tertiary AVC, staff submits the following historic district guidelines as appropriate to this application. Oops, I'm sorry. Can do that. There you go. For development pattern 2.1.3, accessory structures 2.6.1, 2.6.2, design principles 3.1.1, 3.1.2, walls, trim, and ornamentation 4.2.4, windows, doors, and openings 4.3.2, 4.3.3, and 4.3.5, entrances 4.4.4, paint 5.4.2, and contemporary materials 5.5.1 through 5.5.6. Statements of reason based on the information contained in the application in staff's judgment are: 1, the proposed accessory structure is to be constructed within the tertiary area of visual concern. Second, the proposed accessory structure is not attached to the primary contributing structure. 3, the proposed accessory structure is not out of scale with other buildings in the area. 4, the proposed accessory structure is designed to be harmonious to the primary contributing structure. And 5, the proposed accessory structure is not incongruous with the historic district guidelines. Therefore, we recommend the Commission approve this application for a new accessory structure, at this time citing the aforementioned guidelines.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody from the city or the state that would like to give any testimony? Seeing none, we will move on. Does the applicant want to make any final statements? Okay. Discussion among our board here. Are there any questions you'd like to ask?
I just have one brief question, Mr. John. If you could run down the materials that are on the exterior of the shed. I know it's in the application, but for example, tell me about the roofing material and the siding material a little bit.
Should I do that?
Well, you probably ought to be sworn in to do that. Well, maybe we could just put it up on the screen and I could read it out loud for us. Why don't-
Do that cross-section, that'd be fine.
Yeah. And you're going to have to help me because not only are my eyes old, but now they're tired.
All right.
So what do we got? We've got fiberglass asphalt shingles. We've got
a let's see, a fascia.
Yeah, what materials are fascia?
Those are
Wood fascias. Okay, and then
the soffit.
solid wood, that'd be hard.
and hardy siding and smooth texture.
Yes.
And while we're talking about smooth, I think in the fiberglass door, that smooth star, if I'm not mistaken, means it's also a smooth texture.
It's 6-panel smooth.
Yeah, okay. And then all that comes down to a concrete
How
slab.
about the garage door?
And for the record, what material is the garage door?
It's an overhead metal garage.
Metal garage door, okay. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else at this time have any questions? I would entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I move that we find the application for a certificate of appropriateness for 513 New Street to be in non-congruence with New Bern Code of Ordinance Section 15411 through 15429 and New Bern's historical district guidelines based on the following specific guidelines and findings of fact. Applicable guidelines, developmental pattern 2.1.3, accessory structures 2.1.6 to 2.6.3. Design principles 3.1.1 to 3.1.2. Walls, trims, and ornamentation 4.2.4. Windows, doors, and openings 4.3.2. Entrances 4.4.4. Paints 5.4.2. Contemporary materials 5.1 through 5.56. The findings of fact: the proposed accessory structure is constructed within the tertiary area of visual concern. 2, the proposed accessory structure is not attached to the primary contributing structure. 3, the proposed accessory structure is not out of scale with other buildings in the area. 4, the proposed accessory structure is designed to be harmonious to the primary contributing structure. 5, the proposed accessory structure is not in concurrence with the historical history guidelines. I recommend that I make a motion that we approve it with one addition, that a picture of the garage door be accompanying the application, or that the worksheet be turned in with the application. The spec sheet be turned in with the application.
Second.
Okay. All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All of those opposed? The motion passes. Is there a motion to issue a COA?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Call for a vote. All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, the COA can be issued.
Who made the motion on the COA?
George.
George, and then Jim?
Yep.
Okay. And then who made the motion, or the second on the motion after Mr. Woods made the motion? Who
I
made the
second.
second? Jim?
Jim.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so that's been approved for 513 New Street. Thank you all very much for coming to us. So we'll go to item B, the 100 Middle Street with the project on 100 block of Craven Street. Ms. Pohl.
Okay. So this is the application. It's actually a zoning permit application. It came in that way, and then came across came to our attention. It was actually our issue. So the applicant is actually Crown Castle Fiber LLC, and this is their introductory or cover letter for that. And this is essentially a summary illustration of what they are proposing. I have to make this smaller so you can see it all. Okay. The existing condition is on the left. Actually, the little pole that shows up there is like a tan colored pole is already gone. It is a no parking sign. And you can see the convention center in the background, and the yacht club is to the right off the picture, kind of behind the tree. And the foreground is Craven Street. They're proposing this cell pole on the right. This is a site plan which shows the location as the orange dot. Craven Street is a 60-foot right-of-way shown with the dashed lines, and so the pole is to be within the right-of-way about 9 feet from the property line, the center 9 feet from the property line, and about 2'9" from the curb, which still leaves apparently plenty of room for any future 5-foot wide sidewalk if necessary. These are the drawings that show the elevation of the pole. The top is the antenna. This I don't know, bump out on this here at this point is a street light. And then this is a basket-like cage, 2 of them, for some of the equipment mounted on the pole. And then at the bottom, there's also, I think, an electrical meter and another control box. You can see them actually here on the left better. This is at the design review meeting, you asked them to make sure that the light fixture would emit white light as required by the guidelines. So they provided here the spec sheet for the light fixture. The light fixture is actually the one on the top, not this bowl-shaped one, but the round cylinder-shaped one. The rest of the sheet kind of shows the options that were available and what they mean when you specify the actual number. I've highlighted here, which you can't read. The yellow area, the second yellow area, is the one that's being selected. Don't touch that. So, come on. There we go. It's this one here, which is it's an LED light fixture with we'll kind of go across 400 Kelvin color temperature, and the average system watts are 144. The lumen output is 13,840, and the bug ratings, which kind of tells you which way the light is shining or not shining, shows that there's 0. The B2 means a back lighting out of a scale of, I think, 5. It has on the lower end of 2. The upward lighting is 0, which means there's no upward lighting. And then the G is the glare, so that has a 2 out of 5, also meaning a lower value. The other one at the top is highlighted because it is a potential optional one that staff has identified could be an alternative if it's viewed that the number of lumens on the proposed lamp is too high, too bright for that spot. The lower one is pretty much the same, just with only 5,000 lumens instead of 13,000 lumens. It is also a slightly smaller unit. It's 17 inches in diameter instead of 22. It's a second sheet from that spec sheet. It's not helpful. And then this is the rendering that we put together to represent the proposal with a broader context that's maybe more helpful to everyone to see its proximity to the corner as opposed to being, say, to the left or more bottom of the screen here, bottom left of the screen, where it would be standing out in this green lawn. So, and this is our review form. We have for zoning, it meets the requirements of land use ordinance, but telecommunication approval is required per 15-170, and it will require a building permit for building and electrical permits. So, and then our recommendations. So,
Okay, thank you. Would the applicant like to do a presentation or add anything to this?
Sure. Ashley Hake with Crown Castle, and just wanted to clarify that the light bulb and fixture that you guys on the last meeting asked us to provide, we got that directly from New Bern Electric. So they provided us this spec sheet and what they have currently, what's used in the area. So that's what we went off of.
I did contact the electrical department, and they were okay with whichever one.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to share with us?
That's all, unless you guys have questions.
so. Okay.
I have a question.
Sure.
Are there any other poles that you do that resemble trees or anything like that?
So this particular pole, we chose the concrete pole to match the other existing light poles. For small cells, they work differently than cell towers. You'll sometimes see cell towers. Unfortunately, that doesn't work for small cells because they can't have that blockage around the antenna at the top.
What is the functionality of it? What does it do?
So small cell, if you think about when you're looking at your phone and you have 5 bars of service but you can't get on the internet, it's because there's too much capacity taking over the network. So these, similar to a rooftop site but a little different, are lower to the ground and they offset that capacity from the tower. And it helps, so in this particular area, our client saw there was a need for additional data usage in this area. So it helps people to be able to use their phones, make calls, things like that.
So the two options there's quite a difference, especially in the lumens, and I didn't have time to just look at it all, but why would you go with a bigger, more powerful one if the smaller one will do the job?
We'll go with whatever recommendation is there. We went based off of what is existing in surrounding infrastructure, and that's what's on other light poles from New Bern Electric, but if you guys want the other one, again, it's acceptable to New Bern Electric, so we're fine with it. We don't really have a preference. We were just going based off of what was around in the area.
Okay, so is there any testimony from anybody who is a notified proponent of this? Seeing none, is there any testimony from anyone who was a notified opponent? You're an opponent. Okay, if you give us your name and your address.
My name is Marty Manifest. I represent RPG Hospitality, which is 100 Middle Street. The Doubletree Hotel, the adjacent landowner.
Say that again, the Doubletree one?
The Doubletree Hotel?
Okay.
The adjacent landowner.
Okay.
So, Matt, if you could bring back the slide showing the location. First of all, I'm not against cell towers. My cell phone's my best friend, just like many of you. We were notified of this, I think I got the letter about a week ago. I think we can all agree, based on the location, that by your definition, it is in an area of a primary area of visual concern.
You mean this one?
No, sir, the map showing
the actual
where
plan.
orange dot was, yes. If you don't mind. So based on the location, I don't think there'd be any debate that that is in an area of a primary area of visual concern. Looking at your rules, when we're looking at it, there's a couple considerations I have. One, if you look at 2.3 utilities, integrating utilities into historic district landscapes is one of the greatest challenges. Multiple installments of disorganized utilities often result in visual clutter. I'll show you a picture of the existing tower that's been put in downtown New Bern, and I think you'd agree that visual clutter is what it looks like. It's being placed in what I consider to be an area that was designated as an open space. We own that land just to the right of it. It would make great parking, but it's green space instead, and we're dropping that pole pretty much in the middle of nowhere. The no parking sign is still up, and that sits out a little bit. Under 5.3, metals, there's consideration for what the metals are being used to replicate and fit in with the downtown area and what exists. I don't think we're hitting that. So those are my biggest concerns are, I feel that it's non-congruous. Again, I'm not against it. I wish it were a little closer to the tree so it wouldn't stick out like a sore thumb. That is an entrance to our property. I don't know if you're able to, So,
and we can zoom into that.
So this is what this pole looks like. You can see it's been up less than a year, and already because of the way it's coded, Already you're seeing a lot of signs of destruction on the pole. This meter, this electrical meter, sticks out like a sore thumb. And in fact, I mean, I think if you walked past it, you'd think, how did we approve this? This is directly across the street from the birthplace of Pepsi Cola. If you look at the metal trash can next to it, you see that's a power-coated aluminum. It holds up well. I'm going to pull up one other picture and get an idea of the scope. The look and feel of the light post is non-congruous with the historic area. The look and feel of the metal being destroyed in less than a year is non-congruous with what we want in our downtown. This is the main entranceway, and the way the meter just kind of sticks off to the side, and that's, if I'm not mistaken, at about the 5-foot height. So that's our objection. There's spots, and if we looked at this map, I'm sorry, Matt, I'm going to ask you to pop back to the map again. If we looked at the map, there's spots where it wouldn't stick out as much. There's across the street to the left, there's a utility easement right there, and directly below it, and I believe that's also part of the city right-of-way.
Okay,
Yep.
over here.
Yep, yes, sir. Or even coming on the other side of that tree or coming closer to the tree would certainly decrease the visual impact of that pole sitting in the middle.
There does seem to be there's an electric manhole at this red mark here, but otherwise.
That's our consideration. It's a concern. It's a main entryway for our business. We just want it as clean and pretty as it looks. And again, no disrespect to the hard work. I use my cell phone just like everybody else. We need cell phone towers. We're going to be back with more small ones later. We just want to make sure that they have that look and feel of the downtown area that you're requiring of my business, and I want my guests to see when I do finally get it open again. And I promise that's coming too. So
Good. We've been waiting.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Ma'am, would you like to say anything at all?
Yeah, I just want to address some of the concerns. First, I just want to briefly touch on the pole he was referencing across from the Pepsi building. That one was an existing pole, so we attached to, I believe we might have replaced it. This was pre me coming into it, but that was not a new pole. So that was an existing New Bern electric pole that we attached our equipment to. And I am, for some of these other poles, I know we had spoken about last time how they may be historic, but maybe they weren't. We weren't sure. I did speak with Mr. Ruggieri, and we are working through that to figure out if we need to come back here and get any authorizations, and if so, if we need to repaint it, So Crown Castle is the last owner of our facilities. We don't build them and sell them or turn them around. We actually acquired this company that built these previous ones, and so if whatever needs to be done on those, just to let you guys know, we'll obviously come back and do. That's not a problem. We want it to look nice, and I do know what you're talking about with some of the banding. So just wanted to touch on that. For this new pole, the location for small cells has to be within, when a carrier identifies a coverage area it needs, it has to stay within usually 60, really can't go more than 40, 50 feet. And even then, if there's any tree blockage, if there's, these locations are designed specifically to work within their network and with the tower. So we originally wanted it in the middle of that very open space, and obviously that was not acceptable. So we were able to get our client to look at their coverage map and see that moving it to where it wasn't as intrusive, a little further over, they really can't be in the trees. They don't work really in the trees. So we really can't move it. The other side of the street, I talked to them. We have identified, we probably spent, an hours looking at locations and talking through them, and none of the other rights of way on the other side of the street or in that parking lot worked because they're trying to get those two buildings. And so they would be then missing the one. So we really don't have an option to move it much, maybe a couple feet. We tried to replace an existing pole that was there. I guess it went away in the meantime. But, you know, where if the city needs a no parking sign or something to attach to it, of course, we'll do that. The pole itself, it was addressed. The metal pole, it's the standard for, we worked with the poles that New Bern Electric actually uses, and so it's the same pole. So, you know, we're using the same one, so I don't, you know, I disagree with that it's different because it's the same as the other existing poles. And I think that was most of it. If you guys have any other questions, I know we addressed a lot of these in our last meeting.
Yes.
So
The banded appendages that were in the other one by the Pepsi store, is that going to be on the new one that you're putting in, or is that different?
they will be painted. They will not. They shouldn't look like that. And again, working with Mr. Ruggieri, we're going to be hopefully fixing these other ones right that have started to not look as great, because I actually drove by it. I hadn't seen it last time I was here, and I didn't love how it looked. So yeah, we're going to make sure it gets repainted, and this one will. It should look all the same. And again, if you guys aren't happy after it's up, let us know. We'll come back, repaint it. We'll do whatever you guys need to make it look
Is
nice.
powder coated aluminum an option on that sheet?
That might. I can ask it. I'm not sure based on this. It just says.
That's usually the way they start anyway.
Yeah, so normally for a lot of our poles, and I'm not sure about this one, but they normally are powder coated aluminum unless they have to install for some reason it and paint it in the field. But generally they do come from the factory that way.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't be an issue.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
So, sir, is there anything that you would like to say as a notified opponent to this?
No.
From what you said? Okay. Is there anybody else who has standing in the audience that would like to say anything? Seeing nothing. HPC Administrator, you would like to give us some information?
Certainly. All right. Okay. So this project we're calling the 100 Middle Street with project on 100 block of Craven Street. Project to include installation of a new 38.5-foot composite fibertech pole and small cell wireless facilities in the primary AVC. So we submit the following historic district guidelines as appropriate to this application. Development pattern 2.1.3, 2.3.2, 2.3.3, 2.3.4, 2.3.6, 2.3.7. Design principles 3.1.1. Paint 5.4.2, and contemporary materials 5.5.1 through 5.5.4. Statements of reason based on the information contained in the application and staff's judgment are: 1, the proposed communication utility structure and equipment is to be constructed within the public right-of-way. 2, the surrounding buildings are non-contributing structures. 3, the proposed communication utility structure and equipment is not out of scale with other communication utility structures and equipment in the area. 4, the proposed accessory structure is colored to be harmonious to the surrounding landscaping. And 5, the proposed communication utility structure and equipment is not incongruous with the historic district guidelines. So the staff recommends the commission approve this application for a new communication utility structure and equipment at this time, citing the aforementioned guidelines.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody here from the city or the state or any government? Seeing none. Does the applicant want to make any final comments? No? Okay. Does the board, commission members have any other questions, any other comments they want to ask at this point? No? Okay, so are we ready to make a motion? So I call for someone to make a motion related to this.
Madam Chair, I move that we find the application for 100 Middle Street with project on 100 block of Craven Street to be in not congruence with New Bern Code of Ordinance Section 15411 to 15429 and New Bern's historical district guidelines based on filing specific guidelines and findings of fact. Excuse me. Applicable guidelines, developmental patterns 2.1.3, utilities 2.2.3, 2.3.3, 2.3.4, 2.3.6, 2.3.7. Design principles 3.1.1, paint 5.4.2, contemporary material 5.1 through 5.4. Findings of fact. The proposed communications utility structure and equipment is to be constructed within the public right-of-way. 2. The surrounding buildings are non-contributing structures. 3. The proposed communications utility structure and equipment is not out of scale with the other communications utility structures and equipment in the area. 4. The proposed accessory structure is colored to be harmonious to the surrounding landscaping. 5. That the proposed communications utility structure and equipment is not incongruous with New Bern historical finding of facts.
Second.
All right. It's been a second. All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Right here. 1. Okay. So, do we want to move on to approve the COA?
I move that the COA be issued.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, we have a second. Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? None, so the COA can be issued.
George.
All right, so if we move to 413 East Front Street.
For 13 East Front Street, this is the application. Oh, I'm sorry, forgot the intro. Is to include installation of new fence, gutters, and shutters in the primary and secondary AVCs. So this is the application. Robert Perkins is the owner and applicant. Signed and dated. And a description, a verbal description of the fence. And we talked about these at the design review meeting. None of this has changed. And the gutters along the front of the porch. And shutters, just I think it's 2 pairs of shutters on the second floor. We can verify that in a second. All right. So this is a sketch, a sideways sketch of the side of the house. And I think I can turn that one. They're all upside down. Oh, okay, so that was not a good idea. Send us all the way down there. So we'll have to bear with a sideways sketch, I guess. Okay, so this sketch shows the fence along the side of the house, the right side of the house. It's also hard to see. So the fence starts, the top of the fence starts at the back, at the top of the handrail on the porch and extends along the side of the house, then steps up a little bit and extends for 2 more sections up and then steps up another
bit because of course the ground slopes slightly up. Basically the full length of the house. Aerial view. The fence is on the right-hand side. You can see the house is hugging the right-hand side of the property. This is a sample of the fence that, the porch hand railing. Front view of the house. Now we can go a little bit larger. And the right-hand side is where the fence is. You can see the second story has 2 windows, and the front edge of the porch extends the full width of the house plus a wrap around the corner. So this is a detail of the top corner of the right-hand side of the porch. There would be a gutter along that edge there at the top of the picture. And the fence, can't see it here, but the fence would extend from this, essentially from, there's a second post behind this post, from that second post back to and past that extension on the side of the house there. Okay. The front of the porch where the gutters will be. So now this is the other side of the house with the neighbor's driveway. There's to be, I'm not sure if there are gutters here, I'm not sure why this picture's here. We'll find out in a minute. And same with this one. So this is detail of their existing shutters with the existing hardware for that they're proposing to match, as well as the hinge. And so these are some broader context. You can see the house to the left and to the right, the amount of space they have, the amount of front yard, etc. And the overall image of the house. Oh, also to note, is that the window on the front, underneath the porch on the front does have shutters, and they will be matching that pair of shutters. So here's the report by zoning. It meets the requirements of the land use ordinance, and it will not require a building permit. And then our recommendations. So.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Are there any conflicts of interest? Anybody have any question about completeness of the application on the board? No? Hearing none. If the applicant would like to make a presentation or add anything?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I have a couple more sketches in my rudimentary style, which I'd like to present, if I may. That's.
Would you like me to turn off some lights, perhaps?
Could be. That might help us.
This is a plan view of our property, this being our front porch here, steps down and out to the street. And the proposed fence would begin here at the back corner of the porch and extend back to where it intersects with my neighbor's garage, essentially screening the view of our air conditioning and tying together the disparate architectural elements of this small bathroom that pokes out of the side of our house. And this is a just slightly modified view of the fence as I propose it, extending from here to here, where the neighbor's structure is right here. And my final sketch would be a construction view with 4x4 posts, 2x2 spindles, cap, a 2x6 rail, and a reinforced 2x4 by 2x4 bottom rail. And then the side view of the proposed fence with the spindles and the rail and the capping the post.
Does that cap happen at every post?
Yes. And
Anything else, sir, you'd like to share with us at this time?
no, ma'am.
Okay. So we'd be willing to hear testimony from any notified opponent. Seeing none, is there any notified proponent? Seeing none. So there's nobody to make any type of rebuttal. Okay? Is there anyone here who would like to give some relevant evidence that has standing to this project? Seeing none, if we could have some information from the HPC staff.
Okay, so this is for 413 East Front Street to include installation of new fence, gutters, and shutters in the primary and secondary AVCs. Staff submits the following historic district guidelines as appropriate to this application. Fences and garden walls, 2.5.1, 2.5.2, 2.5.3. Shutters, 4.3.4. Gutters, 4.5.5. Statements of reason based on the information contained in the application staff's judgment are: 1, the proposed new shutters and gutters are to be placed in the primary area of visual concern. The new fencing is within the secondary AVC. The new fence is based on historic design of features of the house and in accordance to the applicable guidelines. 3, the design for the shutters is in accordance with the applicable guidelines. 4, the gutters do not replace concealed built-in gutters and therefore are not incongruous with the guidelines. And 5, the proposed construction and alterations are not incongruous with the historic district guidelines. Staff recommends the Commission approve this application for the installation of new fence, gutters, and shutters at this time, citing the aforementioned guidelines.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody from the city or the state to give any testimony? Seeing none. Sir, would you like to make any final comments?
No, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Does anybody here on the commission want to make any comments, have any questions of any of the information that has been presented? Seeing none. Does anyone like to make a motion related to this application?
I move that we find the application for certificate appropriateness for 413 East Front Street to be not incongruous with New Bern's Code of Ordinance sections 15-411 to 15-429, and New Bern's Historic District guidelines based on the following specific guidelines and finding of fact. Guidelines being those stated by staff, statement of reason being those stated by staff.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any more discussion? All right, let us have a vote. All of those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing none. It is approved. Do I hear a motion for a COA?
So approved. So moved.
Second.
Second. Call for a vote. All of those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none. The COA can be issued. And thank you very much, sir, for taking care of this house.
Jim, did you do the second?
Second.
Yeah. On the COA?
Okay, so let us proceed to 302 Avenue A.
Yay. All right.
Yay.
To include replacing the metal roofing with composite architectural shingles and some foundation work. It'll take me some time to get to that one. It's after that big one. Computer's catching up. Okay. Here's the application. The owners are Luis and Maria Rosa.
We can't see it.
Oh.
There we go. And so, Luis Maria Rosa. And signed. And this is a sample from their brochure regarding their shingles, the composite, fiberglass composite shingles. They have chosen, I believe, the charcoal one on the bottom right. And this is the rest of the brochure. It's the GAF, I think Timberline, Lifetime, no, Timberline. Let's go back to that. Let's say Timberline. Yes, Timberline. So, and so these are some photographs of the actual structure that we took in-house, the front, and of course, so now we're talking about the roofing. The corner, and a blow up of that, you can see some details. You can see that a portion of the metal roofing's been removed, and you can see the underlying original cedar shingles. There's a blow up of that. Some of the roofing that was removed. They're also doing some work on the house, but the application also includes consideration regarding some foundation work, not at this particular location, however, but rather towards the rear of the house along Craven Street, North Craven. Those are just some more details of the roof and the soffits. The soffit work and such qualifies as repairs. So in this case, they are leveling the house. So there is some additional work that's being done along the foundation, and there will be some infilling of some brickwork that's been lost, as well as potentially adding 1 or 2 rows of brick in order to, once the leveling is finished, as well as the trim work to be replaced at the bottom of the wood siding. So more shots of what that existing condition is. And this was several weeks ago. So what else we got? That's it. So here's our inspections, zoning and inspections form. It meets the land use ordinance and will require a building permit. And then our recommendations.
Okay. Does anybody on the commission have any conflicts of interest with this project? Any concerns over the completeness of it? Seeing none, would the applicant like to make a presentation or add anything to what's already been presented?
Hi. The last time we met, my name is Louis Rosa, my wife Maria Rosa, and what else? 302 Avenue A. Mr. Cochran, Sean Cochran, we agreed he's going to do the work, but he's waiting for his crews to clear out some other jobs they're on. But I use the term leveling because I'm a lay person, and when we first did this was all kind of new to me. But what we're contracting him to do is to remove and replace the rear addition perimeter girder using treated lumber. So he's going to repair all the rotted stuff that's there, and there's quite a bit. He's going to address the base of each wall stud in contact with the perimeter girder. He's going to restore the damaged floor system components in the back. The house is solid and stable. He went through it, the front part. It was the back part that, I don't know when it was done, years ago, was an addition. And so it was unstable. They didn't do it as well. And so he said that's just the part that needs to get addressed. Everything else is fine. He went through it. And then lastly, he's going to install a perimeter skirt board trim along the base, which I forget who it was. Someone raised that as a concern that it would match the board at the bottom. He's going to replace all of that. When it comes to the work he's doing on the foundation part in the back. Unless you have any other questions, I'd be more than happy to answer.
Okay, that's fine for right now.
Okay.
Okay, are there any notified proponents
Yes.
here?
Oh, well, there are two that submitted letters.
Okay, these are proponents,
Yes.
okay? Are you going to share those with us?
Yes,
These
I
are
can.
two letters.
Yes. A1 Charles Deischer, and let's see, his address is 308 Avenue A, dated October 12th. His letter essentially says, in response to your letter concerning a certificate of appropriateness for the property at 302 Avenue A, please proceed with alacrity. Alacrity? I don't even know what that word is.
Alacrity.
Alacrity, sorry, thank you. Boy, and they say I'm a college-educated guy. Anyway, he continues to say, I can see no logical reason why myself or anyone would stand in the way of any, capitalized, underlined, property improvements. Else the neighborhoods would be cluttered with eyesores such as the former Mamie Sattler store, now mostly uncared for empty lot, HPC's very own free house on North Craven, construction equipment and heavy trailers partially blocking the streets, and problems such as a leaky roof on the Riverside Methodist Church. I would suggest that Riverside and its residents might be better served, if not as well served, by not being a historic district. Regards, C.W. Deischer. Nevertheless, he's in favor of the improvements.
All right, next one.
The second one was an email from Steve Bengal. They're at 1311 North Craven Street, which is within 100 feet of the property in question. He did say, I have inspected this roof and it is my opinion that it should be replaced. I cannot guarantee a repair solution. It has been in poor shape for a lot of years. Steve.
Okay,
That's it.
thank you. So we have a recommendation to replace this roof. Okay, so are there any notified opponents out in our audience of three? I see none. Okay, so there's no rebuttal that we need to look at. Does anyone, any of you, a person who has relevant evidence that you want to present? That would be you, sir. Well, we don't have that either. Okay, so HPC administrator, if you could give us the staff findings for this roof. and the
Certainly.
foundation.
302 Avenue A, to include replacing the metal roofing with composite architectural shingles and some foundation work. Staff submits the following historic district guidelines as appropriate to this application. Foundations, 4.1.1, 4.1.2, and 4.1.3. Contemporary materials, 5.5.6. Statements of reason based on the information contained in the application and staff's judgment are: 1, the proposed foundation modifications and repairs are, as well as the roofing, are to be placed in the primary area of visual concern. 2, the foundation leveling and repairs are proposed as like kind, and the infill areas of the foundation are proposed to include a 1 to 2 inch recess. 3, the roofing replacement material is in accordance with the applicable guidelines. And 4, the proposed repairs, replacements, construction, and alterations are not incongruous with the historic district guidelines. Staff recommends the Commission approve this application for replacing the metal roofing with composite architectural shingles and some foundation work at this time, citing the aforementioned guidelines.
Thank you. Are there any city and state persons in our audience? I see none. Sir, would you like to make any other comments about your application?
No, I'm just very grateful if I can get this.
Okay.
I want to move into my house.
Okay.
Be a good neighbor to my neighbors.
All right. So no comments at this time. Members on our commission, anyone have any comments, any questions to ask at this point in time? Having none.
Well,
You
on
have a
the
question?
recommendations, can the letter from Steve Bingo be put in the packet saying that the roof was beyond repair? Trust me.
I don't know what you mean by putting it in the packet, but it'd be in the file?
Yes.
Yes.
In the file.
Oh, yes.
That it will be, not as a proponent, but as part of the file, because
Yes,
you'll thank me later.
right. The other letter will be in there as well.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, do we have a motion related to this COA?
I move that we find the application for certificate of appropriateness for 302 Avenue A to be not incongruous with New Bern's Code of Ordinance, sections 15-411 to 15-429, and New Bern's Historic District guidelines based on the following specific guidelines of finding fact. Guidelines as submitted by staff, statements of reason as submitted by staff.
Second.
All right. Any further questions or concerns?
Yeah, I'd like to suggest we add guideline 5.2.2, which pertains to wood materials, and then guideline 5.4.3 that pertains to the painting of those materials that are happening on the outside of the sills that are being replaced.
Mover agrees.
You second that?
Second agrees.
Okay, all righty. So can we have a vote? All of those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, hearing none, we accept that. Can I have a motion to approve a COA?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all of those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All of those opposed, hearing none, the COA can be approved.
Lovely old house. Thank you for restoring it.
Yes.
It
It
is.
is. Thank you. Thank you for tending to it.
We'll see you once you get out of the crawl space.
Okay, so we can move to 421 South Front Street.
Bless your heart.
They were very worried all along about the whole process. So, okay, 421 South Front Street to include construction of a wood enclosure around the trash bins in the secondary AVC. So, this.
I don't think you need to go through all that, man. Just.
Well, this is the application. The application actually is not signed nor dated. We did do the. These things are horrible. We did do the stuff, which is it does meet the requirements of the ordinance, and it does not need a building permit. And so recommendations are available.
Okay, anybody have a conflict of interest?
Oh, I would like to add, I guess the applicant will have a chance to supplement the application.
Okay. Nobody has a conflict of interest on the commission? Any issue related to this completeness? Did you want to say something?
I will, but I'll wait to speak after the applicant.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Okay, all right. So does the applicant have anything he wants to present?
This is what,
Okay, so I will also add that apparently he was told by someone at the city that he was allowed to build the fence, so he did. So now this is an after the fact, just in the last 2 weeks, an after the fact approval.
it was last week that two guys showed up and told me I could build it, and I asked them twice. The director to the farmer's market was standing right there, and I said, so I can build. He said, yes, I thought I could. So I own Delco's Construction, so it's constructed, like, it should be good. So how do I?
Okay, so, sorry. Press that button.
That's what I was going to talk about.
Okay.
I thought I saw it in the parking lot.
Okay.
This is actually a very bad picture. But that's what we got.
But it looks just like that. Well, I mean, I own Blackbeard's, so right there beside it, I always see trash hanging out of it, so I just figured, and I didn't charge anybody anything, I just said, you know, I'll take care of it. So that's one picture. It's the side view. That's the front. There's no lock on it or anything. That's the back.
And then he has a plan as well.
And
How tall is it?
how tall is this?
6 feet.
Really?
It covers the dumpster.
And where is it placed?
At the back of the farmer's market, at the very back by the
It's in the
Sky
back
Center.
left-hand corner.
Next to the fence? that
At the
goes-
very back
At
fence.
the very
that,
back,
I'm sorry, the very back fence that separates the property with the condos.
with the condos.
It's just on the left-hand side of it. Like I said, there's
Yeah.
always, when they empty it, it's always got trash hanging out all over the place. And, to me,
So it belongs to the farmer's market?
yes, sir. Well,
The property belongs to the city, and the farmer's market leases it.
And the farmer's market had it built?
no, I volunteered. I asked him, I went to him and asked him, would it be okay if I built a corral? He said, yes.
Who did you ask?
Julie, and then farmer's market.
Okay, so the farmer's market,
Your
Okay,
Blackbeard,
the-
though, it's your dumpsters or
I, it wasn't,
No, no.
They're not your dumpsters?
no, no, sir.
You own Blackbeards.
Correct.
Okay, so it was an eyesore for you.
Really,
So,
well, I mean, it was, but it wasn't. It just, I mean, all the time was trash out, and people park there all the time. I mean, that's free parking. So I figured I could make it look better, and, I mean, I could deal with it, because it's way back in the back. I mean, people with Blackbeards really aren't gonna see it, but it just looked like an eyesore to me.
okay, well, we're trying to figure out,
I think he was just trying to be a good neighbor.
okay, that's all we was trying to figure out,
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
what was
period.
going on. If it wasn't your property, you asked them why, that's all. We got you.
I got you.
All right.
Go ahead and show them the material list.
Built out a salt tree, 4x4 by 8.
You see that okay? Zoom in a little bit.
No, it's good.
I dug the hole 2 foot, put 1 bag of concrete to put 4x4s in. So,
So this is more or less an accessory structure, I guess. Is that how we're gonna see this?
Fencing.
It's fenced.
Well, I
Fencing?
think it's probably technically a screen, right?
Screen?
He's screening the dumpster.
Screening the dumpster,
I
so
know what he's screening.
no, landscaping's a strange place to maybe start, but,
Hmm.
so we got 2.5.3, that's obviously fencing and, trees, peripheral lot, probably locate.
Fences and garden.
I just think, secondary, the 2.5.3 covers.
So, yeah, that'd probably be
That
fine.
covers everything, I believe.
What, 2.5.3?
Yeah.
Right.
Very tall fences and walls with a vertical dimension of 6 feet.
Yeah,
Yes.
hadn't done one
And
of
how
these in a
tall
while.
is this, 6 feet?
just wait.
6 feet.
Because it's in the tertiary area, the secondary and tertiary areas.
Parking, signage, utilities. So, I guess next time, we'll see you before it gets built.
Yes, sir.
Okay, fair enough.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so there is nobody else left in the audience, so I guess that means there are no proponents or opponents to this, so there's no rebuttal.
And we received no letters.
Say that again?
We received no letters.
And we received no letters about this, and there's no one to give relevant information. So, sir, do you want to tell us what your staff says about this structure?
Absolutely. 421 Front Street to include construction of a wooden enclosure around the trash bins and the secondary AVC. Staff submits the following historic district guidelines as appropriate to this application. Fences and garden walls. 2.5.3. Statements of reason. Based on the information contained in the application and staff's judgment are: 1, the proposed trash enclosure fencing is proposed in the secondary area of visual concern, and 2, the proposed construction is not incongruous with the historic district guidelines. So staff recommends the commission approve this application for the construction of a wooden enclosure around the trash bins at this time, citing the aforementioned guidelines.
Thank you, sir. There is nobody in the audience from the state or city. Sir, would you like to make any final comments? All right. Is there any more discussion among the members? Anyone? Hearing none. Would someone like to make a motion?
I move that we find the application for 421 South Front Street not incongruous with historic district guidelines, citing section 15411 through 15429, and New Bern's historic district guidelines based on the following specific guidelines and findings of fact. Fences and garden walls, 2.5.3. Findings of fact, the trash enclosures in the secondary area of visual concern, and it's not incongruous with historic district guidelines.
Thank you. Any other questions any members have?
I second the motion.
Thank you. Let us call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. So that passes. Do I hear a motion for a COA?
So moved. Second.
Right, let's have a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? There are none, so the COA can be given.
Thank you for being a good citizen.
Posthumously, I guess.
And a patient one.
Right, yeah. Well, thank you, and thank you for fixing it and make it look pretty right there.
So,
You know, everybody who got their application approved before they built it got to go first. I'm just kidding.
Thank you for staying.
The earlier the application, usually the earlier you are on the agenda.
Not true.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
So we do have one more item. Certainly we have some agenda points, but we have one more item under number 5, administrative updates and minor works. The upcoming meeting schedule revisions, to discuss revisions to the November and December 2019 meeting schedule. So we can see here, this is the current meeting schedule through the end of the year. It shows November 27th, 2019 with an asterisk to change due to the holiday. However, from November 20th would be the normal. However, what they probably didn't realize was Thanksgiving is late this year, and it's on November 28th. So it actually was moved closer to the holiday rather than farther. So we're recommending that you change it back to November 20th.
So moved.
Well, and then secondly, we have another piece. Wait, there's more. Our staff will be, namely me, will be out of the country for the entire month of December, so we are recommending that the December meetings be canceled.
That's good, because I'll be out of the country too.
Yeah.
I'll be out of the country in November.
Okay.
So moved.
Hopefully after the 20th. So our recommendation is to approve changing the meetings as shown here to November 20th and no meetings in December. That does leave us, just so you know, the November meeting on the 20th to adopt the new calendar for the new year, which we'll have to do then because otherwise we won't know when to meet in January.
Okay. So we'll do that on the 20th.
The reason we couldn't do that tonight is which is what I would have liked to do, is that the city doesn't have its calendar yet until the end of October. I think the first alderman's meeting in November.
So I think we need to vote on this, do we not?
Yes, so you do need to vote on it.
My colleague has a motion and I'll second it.
Okay.
Okay, and all of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? There are none.
Okay.
So take care of what we need.
All right. Do we need to issue a COA for that?
I will if it'll let me get out of here.
No. So, and then the other items, demolition by neglect updates, we have none. General public comments?
There is nobody left in the audience.
So all we have left to do is adjourn.
Okay.
So moved.
All right.
Please God.
JK?
Thank you.
We are done this night at 9:19 p.m.
Who seconded that?
Second.
You did. All right.
All right.